Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 278, Usman versus Edwards 2. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com, and with me, as always, is Keith Schillen, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing this evening?
Good, brother. How you doing, man?
I'm doing really well. Typically, when we do these previews, we do a pretty minimal huddle right before we start recording. Just each of us brings up any points we want to discuss before we dive into the card itself. We usually make sure we are both looking at the same lineup, that there weren't any last-minute changes. This time, we're going in completely raw. We talked for about 30 seconds, and I said, let's just hit record, because I want to get your raw take on some of the general dynamics of this card before we start talking about the individual fights. First off, looking at this card, the 13-fight card, there's scheduled 8 prelims, 5 main card fights. What grade would you give this in anticipation based on what it offers on paper?
Yeah, obviously we have to grade it on a curve, being that it's a pay-per-view, or kind of, I should say a curve, hold it to a little higher standard that it's a pay-per-view. Right. I'd give it like a C-. The main event's really good. It's a well-deserved a fight that we've been waiting a long time. Leon Edwards has had to. He's earned this title fight about 4 fights ago. It kind of reminds me of John Fitch's run before he got a title shot, where he kept winning and nobody wanted to give him the shot, and he won like 8 or 9 in a row, and then they finally had to give him it. I feel the same way with Leon Edwards. So the main event's really good, but it has to me like a big boxing match feel, where the main event people are going to care about, and the rest of the card, the return of Luke Rockhold in the co-main event does anybody really care about Luke Rockhold, I think he's won 1 fight in like 7 years, something like that?
His last win was September 2017. We're coming up on 6 years since the last time, 5 years since the last time he won a fight. And yeah, that's his only win in like 7 years.
Yeah, the win before that was when he won the title against Wyman.
Yep. He hasn't fought at all in over 3 years.
Yeah. It feels like that we lost a big fight off the card. Like, you'd be like, oh, okay, that would make sense. We lost this title fight. Alex Volkanovski was supposed to go against Josh Emmett, and that fell through, something like that. No, that's not the case. Like, we have nothing else.
But even if you got rid of the Costa versus Rockhold fight completely and just left it a 12-fight card, and Jose Aldo versus Merab Dvalishvili was your co-main event, and it's quite possibly a bantamweight title eliminator, the card would actually feel more complete. The positioning of the Costa versus Rockhold fight is what makes it feel weird, I think.
It's a pay-per-view, man. Like, I don't think this one's going to do well.
I agree, and part of it is that this card is being held in Salt Lake City. It's a smaller media market. And I'm not bagging on Salt Lake. I lived there for 15 years. I'm as familiar with the regional scene there as I am the one here in Texas. But yeah, it's a smaller media market. It's always had a good MMA subculture, but it's not a hotbed the way some other cities are. So they are getting a little bit of the day-old bread in terms of everything south of the main event. I'm going to give you some statistical fireworks here.
Okay.
The undercard of this pay-per-view, so 8 fights, there are 5 fighters, not debuting fighters, but 5 fighters that are still looking for their first win in the UFC. Just people that are 0-1, 0-2. I think there's 7 Contender Series products, several of them in fights with each other. So it's got that Dana White Saturday Night Contender Series feel, where they make you win 1 or 2 before you even get to join the real UFC roster. But they usually save those kind of matches for fight night cards. It's interesting to see this pay-per-view undercard so stacked with these. And of the 13 fights on this card, 8 of them have a favorite of -300 or greater.
Wow.
And there's a -500 favorite, and there's one that's climbing towards -1,000. And I can't wait until we get to that one. I'm going to surprise you with it.
And for every Contender Series star, for every Sean O'Malley and Jamal Hill and guys like this, there's 10 Victor Almatranos and Jay Perrins, and just bottom of the UFC talent pool.
Jay Perrin, New Hampshire zone.
New Hampshire zone, yeah.
It's got the return of Lucie Pudilova. I mean, she's won 5 of 6 since she was cut last
Yeah, she
time.
looks good.
She looks good, but I mean,
She lost to Toledo Bernardo in that run, though.
You know what? Usually these intros that we do get me more amped up to talk about the card. This one is doing the opposite, so I almost think we should just jump right in.
Yeah, and you know the worst thing is, like, I don't think it's going to sell well because, I mean, Kamaru Usman, you sell the greatness of Kamaru Usman. That's the selling point of Kamaru Usman. But Leon Edwards, he's not going to talk himself up. He's not going to talk this fight up. I mean, they already had like a pre-presser at the last pay-per-view. It was kind of a flat one, and I don't expect anything exciting. It's not. So I don't think they're going to have the casual appeal to this card.
No. Well, you made the comparison between Edwards and John Fitch. The reason John Fitch had to win 8 in a row before he got a shot at George St. Pierre are the same reasons that Leon Edwards has had to. He's a decent speaker, but he's not sizzling on the mic.
Nope.
He's a grinder of a fighter. Edwards, his run of 9 straight wins, or the 9-fight unbeaten streak that includes the no contest. I mean, it's almost all decisions. So was Fitch's. So you make a very apt comparison. So we understand why. And Usman sells when you have a Colby Covington to pull
Jorge Masvidal.
Jorge Masvidal, someone who will pull him out more on the mic and pull a nastier performance out of him in the cage.
Yeah.
So
they're going to have a hard time selling this one.
They're going to have a hard time selling this one. But for what it's worth, I'm very interested in this fight.
I think they should, like, when Masvidal punched Edwards, like, maybe they can, like, cut off Masvidal's head and, like, squeeze in Kamaru Usman's, and, like, that'd be the pretend like nobody knows.
And on that ghoulish and bloodthirsty note, shall we dig into this card?
Yeah, let's do it.
The first fight out of the gate at UFC 278, at least as the card is currently structured, is a men's flyweight matchup between Daniel Lacerda and Victor Altamirano. Lacerda, the 26-year-old Brazilian, is 11-3 overall. He's 0-2 since joining the UFC as a standout from Shudo Brazil, among other promotions. He has lost back-to-back fights to Jeff Molina and Francisco Figueiredo. The most recent of those, the Figueiredo fight, was at UFC on ESPN Font versus Vera back in April. He got tapped out with a knee bar in just 78 seconds. He will have his third shot to get a win in the octagon, and standing across from him will be Altamirano. The 31-year-old Texan is 10-2 overall. He is 0-1 since joining the UFC out of the 5th season of Dana White's Contender Series and as the outgoing LFA flyweight champ. His debut was against Carlos Hernandez back in February at UFC Fight Night Makhachev versus Green, where he dropped a split decision. Altamirano is a comfortable favorite here. He's minus 200 or so right now. Lacerda around plus 160 as the underdog. Keith, I think the onus is still on both of these guys, or one or the other of them, to prove that he even belongs in the UFC. But do you think either of them gets it done? Well, who gets it done on Saturday? And does either of them get the long-term goal done of sticking around the UFC, say, 18 months from
now? Yeah, I was going to say, you set me up to pick a draw. That would be...
Didn't mean to.
I was trying to look. I was trying to see if I remember how I scored his first fight. I'm looking at MMA decisions. I submitted my scorecard. Actually, speaking of draw, I scored Altamirano versus Hernandez as a draw. So I remember Altamirano. I'm sorry, I'm struggling with his name. I scored his fight on the Contender Series for Carlos Candelero, the guy from Connecticut. That said, like, he's a lower level UFC talent. I mean, they both really are. That's why they're opening up the card. Altamirano, he's southpaw. He kind of hangs his hands low, but he relies on pretty good head movement. He also rolls with punches a lot, so a lot of shots that land on him is kind of deflecting. He's got high volume. He attacks with a lot of combinations. He throws a bunch of kicks. I like that he looks for knees inside. He will look for a takedown, which I like. It's more of a Michael Chiesa style where he's kind of snatch singles, overreaching. Weak takedown defense, though, and he'll play BJJ off his back. which I don't like. He does have 4 submission wins, and the biggest strength of him is his cardio. It's probably why he got the nod over Candelero, was he was kind of pressing hard at the end of that fight. Now, Lacerda was a guy that I really liked on the regional scene. Before he came to the UFC, he had a lot of finishes, a lot of stoppages, but he's looked terrible so far in his run in the UFC. I'd say he's Molina in your debut. That's a tough fight, but like Figueiredo is a winnable fight in your second fight, and to get submitted as quick as does is definitely something you don't like. He can fight out of both stances. He's got head movement. He's got a very slip and rip boxing style. He likes a lot of spinning attacks. He will wrestle, but his wrestling's kind of weak. He'll shoot without any setups. But to his credit, he has like a relentless style to get the fight to the ground. Like he took down Figueiredo. He's very strong, that if he gets on your hips, he can lift you up and slam you. He's very aggressive with his ground and pound, very aggressive with his sub attempts. He has 6 submissions, but similar to Altamirano, I'm sorry, I'm really struggling with his name. He's a little too comfortable off his back. He's on his back a lot because he's a weak defensive wrestler. And he was submitted in his last fight quickly, which you don't like. And cardio has been an issue on him. He's fought deep into fights, and he's kind of faded. He's got a lot of early first round stoppages. And another reason why his cardio is an issue is of how aggressive he is. I'm not high on either. I like the volume of Altamirano. Like he can win rounds with just his volume. He's going to have to avoid takedowns from Da Silva. I think he's going to stop enough, but he's got to stop like an early onslaught of Silva too. I was so on the fence. I think the odds are way off in this fight. Like, to me, this is as pick 'em as it comes. Like, having Altamirano like a 2-1 favorite is really surprising to me. I want to say this without giving. I would give away the reason I'm making this pick. I'm going to go with Da Silva. Lacerda Da Silva. I'm sorry. I know it's both his last names. I'm going to say the split decision for Lacerda in the opening fight.
There you go. We have some dissension right out of the gate, because I do favor Altamirano in this one for a lot of the reasons you mentioned. And the main thing that sticks to me is Altamirano is I think he's more of a round winner, and he definitely has more experience going past the first round. Lacerda, as you mentioned, has a ton of early finishes. Just his aggression, his good pop on the feet, his aggressive ground game got him a lot of quick finishes in Brazil. And just a week removed from us seeing David Onama, despite all of his upside, display some of the worst cardio that we've ever seen out of that good a fighter at that low a weight class. It's hard for me to get that out of my mind. And Altamirano has proven that he can win rounds late in fights. He did it in the UFC. He did it in LFA. I mean, in LFA, his last fight was a 5-round fight because it was for the vacant title. That alone lets me know that even if Lacerda comes out like a house on fire and wins the first round decisively, unless he finishes Altamirano or gets a 10-8, all the dynamics favor Altamirano from there. So give me Victor Altamirano by decision. I could see it being a splitter where the dynamic is pretty clear. Lacerda comes out hot, Altamirano pulls ahead as they go later into the fight, and it all hinges on how people scored the first round. It all hinges on how people scored the second round, or whether they scored the first round at 10-8 or not, some kind of dynamic like that. But give me Altamirano in a close decision. Next up on the UFC 278 undercard is a men's bantamweight matchup between Aori Qileng and Jay Perrin. Aori, the 29-year-old who goes by the Mongolian Murderer, is 22-9 overall. He is 1-2 since joining the UFC as a standout from the WLF, that's Wu Lin Feng promotion in China. He won his last time out. It was a first-round TKO of Cameron Else at UFC Fight Night, Lemos versus Andrade back in April. That possibly preserved his job after back-to-back losses to Jeff Molina and Cody Durden to open up his UFC run. He's going to try to make it 2 straight against Perrin. Perrin, 29-year-old out of New Hampshire, is 10-5 overall. He is 0-1 since joining the UFC, as a veteran of the third season of Dana White's Contender Series, but he did lose in that appearance. So went back to Cage Titans and CES, won a couple more fights, then debuted in the UFC back in February at UFC Fight Night Walker versus Hill, where he dropped a unanimous decision to Mario Bautista. The odds here are some of the closer ones on the card. Again, this card is full of lopsided matchups on the books, but Aori Qileng is a moderate favorite. He's minus 170 or so on most sites. Perrin out there around plus 140 or so. One thing you can say for both these guys, Keith, is that they've not gotten any softballs. I mean, Aori Qileng has faced Jeff Molina and Cody Durden. Jay Perrin had to debut against Mario Bautista. These are fairly tough matchups
really
for
tough.
people coming in unheralded.
And Perrin took it on days' notice. Like that week, he took the fight.
So these guys are both kind of due for a break, and it turns out that their break is each other. Who gets it done and at least keeps his job for another day?
Yeah. Richie, the thing that stands out to me is he's big for the weight class. He's a long and lengthy guy. He fights with a lot of volume. He's got some pretty good pop. He really steps into his shots. I mean, he got thrown to the wolves and like a Jeff Molina, who both of us like. He hurt Molina, which means a lot to me. He has a lot of like long rangy kicks. If he wants to get inside, he'll throw like a flying knee to quickly close the distance. He showed off he can offensive wrestle a little bit by taking down Jeff Molina. Good throws inside. I mean, he beat up Cameron Else on the ground with some hard ground and pound, but he showed his takedown defense. He showed a little bit. He stuffed some takedowns from Cody Durden, but he still gave up 5 takedowns, which is a big issue. On the regional scene, I seen some really bad stuff when I was doing tape study for him before. Like he had his back taken. He was crucified against like some low-level guys, which I definitely don't like. But he can go hard for 15 minutes. That's one thing he has. Like, even though he can be outclassed, he's going to keep pressing. Jay Perrin, very similar. Like, he's got cardio is not the issue with Jay Perrin. He's a high-output guy, compact boxer, likes to keep everything inside, march down his foes. He's one of these guys, he's willing to eat a shot to get in range to land some of his own. His left hook is definitely his best strike. I would say he lacks one punch, like fight-ending power, which is an issue. He also has a very heavy boxing style, so he's very heavy on his front foot, so he's open to get his legs kicked out. He will wrestle when he gets in the clinch. He likes to kind of grind in there, dirty box, knees, elbows. He will drop down for a takedown. Not a great wrestler, and he definitely needs to control the ground a little bit more. It's not really a strength of his, but I have seen some fights on the regional scene when he gets some back takes and stuff. And I mentioned he's got good cardio. I second fight in a row. I think the odds. You said this is one of the closer fights. I think the odds should be even closer than it is. I am like the anti-homer. Like, I never take the New England guy. And even with me saying that, I think this should be a pick'em fight. Both guys are UFC level. I think they're both UFC level guys, but I think they're lower level UFC guys. Perrin's a dog. I mean, he's going to make this a war. I can see him get inside and land some good shots, maybe even get a few takedowns. But I'm still going to go with Richie Lang. I think we're going to have a back and forth fight. Both guys having moments, but I'm going to take Richie by split decision with no confidence in my pick.
Yeah, I see some of the same observations that you do there, right down to the level of some of the fighters that Aori Qileng took on in WLF. I mean, I don't use this term very often. It's a little denigrating, but there ain't no can like a Chinese can. When there's a promising like 19, 20-year-old over in like WLF that they want to bring along, they will find some dudes for that dude to beat that they just look barely trained. It is something else. And Aori Qileng did feast on some of those guys, but he has some legitimate physical gifts. As you mentioned, he's a big guy for the weight class. I mean, he looks like he cuts a ton of weight, but nonetheless, he's able to keep a high pace for the duration of a fight. I mean, he went the distance with both Molina and Durden, and the reason he lost those fights was not his cardio. It was his defensive wrestling in the case of Durden, and in the case of Molina, it's just that Molina's a better fighter. I do favor him over Perrin here. I think his reach advantage is going to tell, especially if he starts using his kicks. Perrin probably could take him down when you're that tall for the weight class like Aori Qileng and you're all legs. Takedown defense is always going to be questionable, but I don't know if Perrin is going to go to that route, or maybe not until it's too late. So I see Aori Qileng winning this one by decision as well. We head now to the men's flyweight division once again for a matchup between Amir Prince Albazi and Francisco Figueiredo. Albazi, the 28-year-old Iraqi-born, Swedish-based, training out of England flyweight, is 14-1 overall. He is a perfect 2-0 since joining the UFC out of Brave CF. He debuted back in July of 2020, choked out Malcolm Gordon late in the first round with a triangle, came back last January and won a unanimous decision over Jalga Shumagulov. He has been on the shelf ever since. He is now finally, 18 months later, coming back, and waiting for him will be the other Figueiredo brother. Francisco Figueiredo, 32-year-old Brazilian, is 13-4-1 with one no contest overall. He is 2-1 since joining the UFC out of the Jungle Fight promotion. He won his last outing back in April. It was the first round submission of Lacerda that we talked about earlier. Prior to that, he had dropped a unanimous decision to Malcolm Gordon. That was back last July. Albazi, another big favorite here. He is minus 360 right now. Figueiredo plus 260 or so on the comeback. Keith, the UFC clearly just saw Albazi coming out of Brave CF, which again has become quite a pipeline for talent in the last couple of years. And they actually signed him before the COVID pandemic started, because the real wave of fighters from Brave came once everything was locked down. They were putting on shows in Abu Dhabi, and Brave CF was located right next door in Bahrain, so they could get fighters there without having to worry about getting them out of Russia or Brazil or the US. But Albazi, they signed, even before that. But they clearly saw he was young, dynamic, a finisher, a bit of charisma on him, and they see a potential star, and they kind of threw him in the deep end. I mean, Malcolm Gordon isn't a world beater, but he's a decent first test for an incoming flyweight. Then Jalga Shumagulov, a guy that you and I have talked about, where
it's a good test.
Despite him being like 500 in the UFC, it's he has the talent of like a top 15-ish guy, and he's handled both of them. And I almost feel as though Figueiredo is a lateral move from those fighters. Figueiredo, when I look at Figueiredo, it's the same dynamic as a lot of MMA sibling types, where one is a much better fighter than the other. Whether you're talking about Valentina or Antonina Shevchenko, or you're talking about Douglas and Diego Lima, Gilbert and Herbert Burns, where both siblings, they have similarities. Like their general body type is about the same, their general skill set is about the same, and just one of them is much better at it for some reason. That is definitely Francisco Figueiredo. I mean, he looks exactly like Davison without the bleached hair. They're both titanically sized flyweights. They're not the tallest flyweights, but they just got like big upper bodies with muscle on their frame and clearly cut a bunch of weight. He has the same basic skill set, hard kicks, crisp punches, good aggressive submission game, but he just doesn't quite have the same athleticism or killer instinct that Davison does. And because of that, Davison is, on any given day, maybe the best flyweight in the world, and Figueiredo is kind of holding to the bottom of the UFC roster by his fingernails. On paper, he has some things that could challenge Albazi, but this card is full of huge favorites. Like I said, 8 out of the 13 fights have a minus 300 or greater favorite. This is one of the ones where I kind of get it, because Albazi he was a killer in Brave CF. He's looked great in both of his UFC appearances. He's still just 28 years old, which, at flyweight, it means he's just entering the leading edge of his prime. Probably 28 to 32 or so are your real prime years. And he's going to be faster. He's going to be more elusive on the feet. I can see him kind of piecing up Figueiredo on the feet, just with advantages in speed and head movement and footwork. If it goes to the ground, Figueiredo is a good grappler, but Albazi is a venomous grappler. So I think this
venomous.
is going to be
like that.
Yeah, like
I like that. That's would you just write an article or something right before this?
I'm writing articles all weekend, man.
There you go.
He's a venomous grappler. He's just fast moving, positionally pretty sound, but clearly bent on finding the submission. And I think that's going to work against Figueiredo. And if it doesn't work early, I think it's going to work late, because if one of these guys gets tired faster, it's going to be Figueiredo. So give me Albazi by, I'm going to say 3rd round submission, but a 3rd round TKO on the ground would not surprise me either.
Yeah. I like how the way you described Figueiredo. You said that, he's not his brother. I mean, he's not close to the athlete. He's not explosive. He was the one when his parents signed them up for jiu-jitsu classes. Like, they were signing up Davison, and they were like, well, we can't leave Francisco out. We got to sign him up too. But it kind of like, hey, coach, can we get like buy one, get one half off kind of thing? And we hoping he quits and he doesn't stick around, I mean, I get it. Like, I see people in softball as my oldest daughter plays travel softball, and sometimes you have to take the other sister with you if you want the good one. I'm not talking about my kids. I have one daughter who does softball, very very good player. The other one, she doesn't do sport. Well, she does different sports, not softball. So I wasn't talking shit about my own kid. No, she's from New England, so I wouldn't pick her in a fight. So actually, you know what? That one I actually might. She's a tough one. Well, that one
I mean, if it was against Jorgen De Castro or something, yeah.
Yeah. No, Jorgen would beat my daughter, then celebrate like the way he did it when he did nothing against Junior Dos Santos, and then acted like he knocked his head off when Dos Santos threw a punch at him and his shoulder exploded.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, back to the junior brother of the Figueiredo family, the junior varsity brother. He's a southpaw. He can fight out of both stance. As you mentioned, he's not explosive like his brother, but he's actually probably more of a technician than his brother. We've talked about this past. He's a pressure counter striker, pretty accurate on the feet, short shots, not many tells. I think the reason why I say short shots for him, when you hear the name Figueiredo, you expect these big, explosive, load up on everything, fast hooks. And that's not really him. He's more of like short, just busy jab, nice secondary punches, like a short right hand. He will throw hooks, but again, it doesn't have the fire that Davison has. Again, it's a really unfair comparison because we're comparing him to the best guy in the division. We're talking about the world champion. So it is a little tough. I like that he goes down to the body. He throws a lot of kicks. I like that he does step in knees. Speaking of knees, he's also similar to Qileng, who likes to throw flying knees to kind of close the distance, something that Figueiredo will do. But I've said this before, he has 2 major holes defensively. That's one, he keeps his chin high in the air and he drops his hands. He isn't the wrestler Davison is, but he can get the fight to the ground. He showed some pretty good top control against Jerome Rivera, and he is a submission threat. He has 8 subs in his career, including a submission in his last fight. But he isn't a good defense wrestler. I mean, Malcolm Gordon took him down twice. He had a hard time getting held down by Malcolm Gordon. I will say though, he has shown some improvements in his cardio. That was a big question mark in him. I wouldn't say cardio is a strength, but I wouldn't say it's a weakness now either. Now, Albazi, on the hand, you talked about his striking. He's a really good striker, very accurate, technically sound, works behind a really good active jab. I love that he cuts angles when he attacks, so he's never kind of right in front of his opponent. I love how he works himself into range and then unloads hard shots only when the openings are there. Like, he doesn't waste energy. He can keep his distance with his footwork and this check hook that he throws, hard calf kicks, and he's well-rounded. He can wrestle. Good timings on the reactionary double. Like, if he's getting pressured, or if he starts unloading and his opponent kind of winds up to try to answer one back. Oh, I got caught. Let me get one back. That's when Albazi will actually drop down, go underneath those shots, take him down. Really good smothering top control. I like that he works to better positions. He has 8 career subs. He's got subs everywhere in transitions, on top, on bottom. So I think this is a solid fight. I don't know if Figueiredo should be this massive of an underdog based on the long layoff from Albazi. Like that's like the one little bit concern I have. I actually think they're both pretty solid fighters, but on the feet, I really like Albazi. I think he can piece him up, and then I think in the wrestling, getting entries, slamming, riding on top, some really good ground pound. I just think he just outworks Figueiredo for most of the fight. Give me Albazi by decision.
We head now to the welterweight division for a matchup between two more gentlemen looking for their first octagon win. It is a pair of Dana White's Contender Series graduates, same season, in fact, in the form of AJ Fletcher and Ange Loosa. Fletcher, the 25-year-old Louisiana native, is 9-1 overall. He is 0-1 since joining the UFC out of season 5 of Dana White's Contender Series. He debuted in March at UFC Fight Night Santos versus Ankalaev, where he dropped a unanimous decision to Matthew Semmelsberger. He'll be taking on Loosa, the 28-year-old Swiss fighter, is 8-3 overall. He is also 0-1 in the UFC. He also won his way into the UFC I apologize. He also appeared on Dana White's Contender Series Season 5. He lost there. I forgot. He took on Jack Della Maddalena, dropped a unanimous decision. He went and beat UFC and PFL veteran, well, everything veteran, John Howard at XMMA in April, got signed to the UFC, made his UFC debut like on 2 weeks from when he beat Howard at XMMA. He was in the UFC fighting Munir Laze, where he dropped a unanimous decision. That was at UFC on ESPN, Luque versus Muhammad. Odds here, again, another one of the close ones on the books. Fletcher minus 155, Loosa plus 125 or so. Keith, I'm going to throw this one to you first, but this is a lot of physical horsepower on display. These guys are kind of physical, like they're negatives of each other. Like, one is white and like so white that his nickname is Ghost, and then Ange Loosa is
Jesus.
I'm not kidding. Like, it's because of his tan or lack thereof. And then Loosa is black, but aside from that, they are like stocky, ripped welterweights. Going to be a lot of muscle on display. Is there going to be a lot of UFC talent on display, and who gets it done?
Yeah. UFC talent. I think both guys are pretty solid. I like that you mentioned John Howard. Shout out to my boy Chicken Parm Dave Stewart. Me and him, before I was doing the media thing, it was actually Dominic Cruz, TJ Dillashaw fight, and we were there in the crowd, and we look up, and it was like we're not on the floor, but we snuck down to the first row. We actually sat right next to Tisha Torres. Like we didn't have these seats, we snuck down, and Tisha Torres was the seat right next to me. But I look back, and remember Jorge Rivera?
Oh yeah.
Oh, he's like, so we're not on the floor. We're like the first section as it starts.
There's a who's who of Boston MMA in this.
Yeah,
section.
like how it starts going up. Like whatever you call that section, we're sitting in that section. And I look back, and I'm not lying. Like 30 rows back is Jorge Rivera. Now we're drinking, we're having a good time. I go, dude, is that Jorge Rivera? We say it super loud, pointing up to him like this. And we're like, and he like. It was like a dull in the middle of a fight, so it wasn't like got everyone's attention, and 99% of people had no idea who that was. But the whole reason I tell that story, what does that have to do with John Howard? So we were like, we just had this ongoing jokes about Jorge Rivera, like the disrespect this guy gets. He's 45 rows up, like he's like the janitor of the place. He's got to clean it afterwards. And then we looked, and about 40 rows behind him was John Howard. like I don't know if John Howard actually technically was in the arena. Like that's how far up he was. And this is like when I think he was still in the UFC at this time, or maybe just was out of the UFC. So that's my John Howard story. Like anyways,
he's working the parking lot.
Yeah, he was validating my parking ticket. Anyways, that's not as good as Mike Rodriguez when I went to a this one I wasn't media for sure. Dog, and I was doing that was the Chris Weidman, Dominic Reyes card, and I went to the open workouts and I was filming stuff for Sure Dog. And Mike Rodriguez, who is in the UFC at this time, is waiting in line to get into the place. I'm like, really, guys? Like, he's waiting in line, like, to get into the gym. Yeah, like it's not even like the arena.
I mean, he wasn't a great fighter, but that's still pretty rough.
That does not. All right, I know I'm going off. The story times with Keith. I'm going to give you one more story. This is a Nolan King special. Me and Nolan King, where I think I might have told you this story. I apologize if I told you again. As I'm getting old, I don't remember stories I tell. Me and Nolan King have this ongoing, and if you guys don't know Nolan King from MMA Junkie, fantastic dude. We have this ongoing joke about Yaroslav Amosov, where there was one event we were at the Mohegan Sun. We were there for like 4 or 5 days covering the event, and Amosov is just walking around the casino. Everywhere we must have saw him like 12 times. Like, we go to get something to eat. There's Amosov sitting in the corner by himself. There's always things going on. Like, every time we look, we saw him. So I'm waiting in line when the event's about to start. He's fighting on this card, obviously. Mm-hmm. You have to understand the whole dynamic of the casino. So we're waiting in line. There's the media, and then there's the people got to go through. Now we have our own entrance, so we got quick without waiting in line. And I joke, I say, yeah, no, Amosov's probably waiting in line. I say this joke. I look over. I swear to God, there's Amosov waiting in line with the people, like the fans getting into the arena.
And he's fighting on the card. And he's like 16-0. He's one of the best fighters in the world.
Yeah, he's waiting in line. And I'm like, where's his quarterman? Like, where's his – the whole time we never saw him. No, wait. We never seen him, like, other than freaking by himself. Like, where's his people? What's this? So anyways, later on, the same show, he fights, right? I go to the bathroom. I'm taking a piss. You kind of like, look at the person next to you, I'm all done. I turn over. I swear to God, there's Amosov right next to me taking a leak. I'm like, what fucking guy is everywhere? So me and Nolan King just have this ongoing joke. Like, I'll be on vacation, and I'll be like, dude, I just saw Amosov. Anyways, back to what fight are we talking about?
We were talking about Fletcher versus Loosa.
Yeah. All right. Fletcher versus Loosa. As AJ Fletcher is, he's your. As I'm trying to get my notes up, I like about this guy is that he's only 25 years old. So I like that. As you mentioned, he's a short and stocky, ripped up guy. He's a great athlete. He can fight out of both stances. He throws a lot of feints, and he throws his feints because he wants to set up power shots. He likes to end the fight with single shot every single blow. And because of this, his output is a little low. Like, he's not going to swarm you with output. He's kind of like a little Yoel Romero where he lulls, and then he explodes. What I do like is I kind of like bay all the way out. Then he jumps in the pocket and he's throwing these huge blows. He throws some fun spinning attacks. He'll throw a flying knee like he did on the Contender Series. He does make the mistake of backing straight up on the center line, but I don't like. But he's a really, really good wrestler. Very physically strong, lightning fast, double legs. Really good at just dropping underneath his opponents. Like, he'll come in, throw a big shot, and then when the same thing I just said in the last fight, when his opponent goes to kind of get one back, boom, he's underneath. You mentioned he's super jacked, gets in the easily, grab a leg, the opponent's going for a ride. He's the negative with that is he's a classic wrestler where if you put him on his back, he struggles on the bottom. Now, Loosa, good output on his feet. Good striker, a lot of jabs, short, straight right is his best punch. He switches stances in mid combination, which I like. The best fighters do that. So it's coming from, you're starting to react to block one angle and it's coming from a different angle. So it's not what you expected when the combination first comes in. One negative, though, I noticed is he tends to watch his shots a little bit too much instead of he'll throw a shot out instead of bringing it back to his face quickly, which kind of leaves him open counter. He's got to get blasted really bad for that, which is surprising against a guy like Munar Lizez, who he just fought, who's really good fighter, didn't make him pay for that. I like that Loosa goes to the body. He did struggle with the size and the range of Lizez. But he showed real durability. I mean, he was getting blasted and he kept coming. Like, I was impressed by that. He got beat up in the body, didn't stop. he threw a lot of inside leg kicks himself. One negative, he really pillared defenses, probably why he got blasted a lot because of that, which I don't think it really works. He will shoot for takedowns, but he's definitely not a wrestler. He's got pretty decent takedown defense, and he's got cardio. I mean, he had moments against Munar, like just kind of coming hard. Los is a tough guy. He's not a great athlete, but he seems a little bit of like an overachiever. Like he's gonna be so tough and kind of put him in a position where he can win a fight that he shouldn't. He just keeps coming, and I like that a lot. He'll probably try to do the same thing against Fletcher, but I love those wrestle boxers. I think Fletcher has the advantage in the power. I think he has enough striking to set up his takedowns, and I expect him to get a few takedowns, and I think Fletcher gets a decision win.
Great. I think I mentioned when we talked ahead of Fletcher's debut that, I saw him way back when. I saw him in literally his second pro fight. I drove from Houston over to Lake Charles, Louisiana.
Was Amasoff there?
I'm pretty sure he was. I mean, there were a lot of shaven-headed white dudes there. Like he could have been somewhere in the back. I didn't look to the left or to the right when I was in the bathroom. But I'm not saying it's the same as when you saw, John Jones in like his third or fourth fight or something. But Fletcher was obviously special enough that, I gave his coach. He didn't even have a manager yet. Again, he was 20 years old and it was a second pro fight. I was like, I gave him my card and said, hey, if he books a fight outside of like Fury or LFA, give me a buzz, make sure I know about it. I'd like to talk about him or talk to him. I agree with your assessment of his skills and his physical gifts. The guy he reminds me of, and I'm not saying he is the next this guy or he'll be as good, but just the way he stands, the way he strikes, even the way he wrestles just makes me think of early Johnny Hendricks. Because he's a short, stocky guy and then makes himself even shorter by having kind of like a hunched over stance that he does so he can drop levels. So his level drop is even faster. Just got that.
Michael Chandler's similar to that. Chandler has a similar style.
Yeah, just that kind of sets up that cannonball double leg. And because he's hunched over, it makes those feinted level changes really effective. And the feinted level changes are to set up that right-handed fastball, which is Johnny Hendricks' favorite. Chandler obviously is a much more diverse striker than Johnny Hendricks, but any wrestler that's orthodox loves the overhand right.
Mm-hmm.
That's AJ Fletcher, and he is a hell of an athlete. At some point, he's going to run into a guy where he needs to develop more than that to make it all the way to the top. This isn't 2012. This isn't 2005. Mm-hmm. But it's been enough so far. It turns out that night that I saw him in Louisiana, that was his only guy up through his UFC debut that actually made it the distance with him. All of his other fights were finishes. He and Loosa both are guys with good upside that just ran into a bigger, more evolved, maybe, I won't say better, but at least more evolved version once they got to the UFC. Because, Fletcher ran into Matthew Semmelsberger, who's also a fantastic
great athlete. Yeah.
A great athlete, but bigger. Semmelsberger isn't short. I think Fletcher's going to be able to kind of take advantage of Loosa here. I think he's going to be able to put Loosa on his butt early and often. It'll remain to be seen if Loosa can make adjustments as the fight goes on, or if the fight even does go on. But I think he's going to be faster on the feet. Well, definitely going to be faster on the feet. I'll be interested to see if his feints throw Loosa off enough so that he can sneak in the big punch, or if he's just going to go to the wrestling right away, put him down and go to work there. Fletcher's ground and pound is scary. He can get a little overeager sometimes. I've seen worse fighters than him kind of escape from him underneath because he's so bent on just pounding their head into guacamole. But I'm not saying he makes guacamole this time, but I think I think he's going to get the better of this one. Give me Fletcher by I'm going to say a pretty lopsided decision. He probably wins all 3 rounds, and there's no question at the end of this. Next up, a women's flyweight matchup between Miranda Maverick and Shanna Young. Maverick, the 25-year-old Missouri native, is 10-4 overall. She's 3-2 since joining the UFC as a standout from Invicta Fighting Championships. She won her last time out. It was a second round rear naked choke submission of Sabina Mazo at UFC Fight Night Santos versus Ankalaev back in March. That got her back on track after back-to-back losses to Macy Barber and Erin Blanchfield. She'll try to keep the good momentum going against Young. The 31-year-old Virginia native is 8-4 overall. She is 1-2 since joining the UFC, also as a veteran of Invicta and as a veteran of Dana White's Contender Series, though she did not win in her appearance. She was on season 3, got choked out by Sarah Alpar in the second round. Since joining the UFC, she has lost 2. Those were against Macy Chasson and Stephanie Egger, both of those at 135, then dropped to 125 and pounded out Gina Mazzani in the second round. That was at UFC on ESPN, Font versus Vera back in April. So she also is looking for her second straight win. She is not favored to do so by any means. She is one of the bigger underdogs on the card. Right now, Maverick minus 500, Young plus 350 as the underdog. Keith, I'm going to ask you for your pick, your analysis of this fight. I'm going to ask you a simple yes or no question leading into it. Okay. Has Miranda Maverick, has her UFC run disappointed you so far?
No.
Okay. And go.
Okay. I mean, I get what you're saying. Like, she's a super prospect. I like her a lot. And she's only 25. So she's probably just starting to reach her prime years or not there yet. She's got 2 back-to-back losses, you mentioned. I mean, she got absolutely destroyed by Erin Blanchfield, and I thought it would be a much closer fight. But to me, that just Erin Blanchfield is really, really good and just a bad stylistic matchup. And I thought she beat Macy Barber. If she had a win over Macy Barber right now instead of a loss, I don't think you even asked that question.
Yeah.
And most people thought she won that fight. So she's a southpaw. She's got some really high output. She's a good kickboxer. She's very athletic. She's pretty elusive. She has a kind of stick and move style. She likes to dart into range, land shots, and then get out. She has a karate background. She likes that Holly Holm side kick to kind of keep her distance. She attacks with combinations. She's very physically strong. We've seen her. She's got some ripped up arms. She likes to get in the clinch and just batter in close and grind. She looks for elbows. I mean, she busted up Luana Jojua with a nice elbow inside. She's got a good wrestling, good timing on her entries, good top control. I like that she works for like one body pot, like the Dagestanis does. She likes to go for like the Dagestani handcuff and kind of control. She beat a good grappler. There's another one, Jillian Robinson. Jillian Robinson's a good fighter. She's a good test for a young fighter. I don't want to say she's a good fighter, but you get what I'm saying. Like, that's a tough test, and she won in the areas that she wasn't supposed to win. She won grappling exchanges against Jillian Robinson, though. Erin Blanchfield showed that she isn't close to an elite grappler. Like, Blanchfield showed that. Blanchfield absolutely smoked on the ground, but she showed against Robinson that she could win battles with her grappling. She's got some really good ground and pound, slick back takes. I mean, we saw that in our last fight against Sabina Mazo. She is a submission threat. She has 5 subs, though she will kind of lose position chasing for a submission, which I don't like. And while I thought she beat Macy Barber, the reason why Macy Barber got the win is because Barber came on strong at the end and Maverick kind of gassed out a little bit. I kind of chalked it up to being really young, kind of inexperienced at that time. Shanna Young, who she's going against, I think Shanna Young is underrated. I really do. Most people, I think, would view her as a bottom of the division kind of talent, and I don't view her that way at all. She's not the prospect Maverick is, but she's a tough test. She's got some high output on the feet, kind of Taekwondo style, where little bladed stance, quick hands. She likes her overhand right. She moves straight back on the center line, which I don't like. But she shows that she can kind of eat a shot to land some of her own. Kicks are definitely the best part of her striking game. She likes to push kick, front kick, and she's a solid wrestler. She was an NCAA wrestler. She likes to use her size in the clinch, grind in there, wear her opponent down. She has terrible fight IQ, though. She went against Stephanie Egger, and that's like the one thing you don't do against Stephanie Egger is go in the clinch with her, and she went straight for it multiple times. But when other fighters, she gets in there, knees, elbows inside. She likes upper body takedowns. She will like drop down on the hips and kind of pull her opponent down, which is good. I'd say good entries from the outside, a solid top game, good ground and pound. She's not a submission threat though, and she struggled. If you put her on the back, she really struggled on the bottom. So she should be exploding to get back to feet or look for scramble opportunities. She's more kind of like laying on her back, which I don't like. But she has good cardio. She can go hard. So I think this is a tougher stylistic matchup than the odds suggest. What would you say the odds were?
Maverick is minus 500. She's the second biggest favorite on the card.
Yeah, I don't think she should be that big. I think that says a lot of how people view Maverick, but I also I don't think it shows. So I'm not trying to dog Maverick at all. I just think it doesn't show how Young is a little bit of a sleeper. I think that's the issue there. I think Young is much better than people think, but I do think there's tiers to MMA, and I think Maverick is on a different tier. Maverick is the overall better athlete. Give me Maverick to land the better shots on the feet. I think she stuffed some of the takedown attempts. She might even get a takedown herself. If she gets on top, that's where Young struggles, and Maverick really excels dropping bombs from on top. So I don't think she gets Young out there, but I say she wins. She wins a decision.
I like that analysis. I've got to say that I'm mildly surprised that Shanna Young has made the transition to flyweight as smoothly as she has. I mean, she's big.
Yeah.
And for the early part of her career, she was fighting huge women. You look at some of the names she fought early in her career, like on the regionals and in Invicta. I mean, she's fought Pam Sorensen, she's fought Jessica Borga, who's like a big 145er. In her first two UFC fights, she took on huge Macy Chasson. She took on Stephanie Yeager, who's big. Like a good big and has that judoka just strength.
Yeah.
When Shanna Young is the bigger, stronger fighter, she is capable of bullying somebody. Like when she fought Gina Mazzani, I think there was a point in the first round where you could almost see it dawn on her. Oh my goodness, I'm the stronger person in this fight for once. And from there, she just mauled Mazzani. And Gina Mazzani is a pretty good fighter. But Shanna Young was a lot stronger. I'm interested to see how this plays out against Maverick, because Maverick obviously is a ball of muscle, but she is going to be much shorter than Shanna Young. They're listed as 4 inches apart in height. Maybe that's true. I'll be interested to see what the reach disparity is. Maverick has adapted her game really well to being the shorter fighter. You mentioned that she's good at bouncing into range to land punches because that's what she's going to have to do. She's shorter than almost everybody at 125. She's got that, Jessica Andrade type build. That's the dynamic I'm most interested in seeing, because Maverick is going to be a lot faster than Young. She's going to be trying to work that game where she's, bouncing in and out, throwing some feints, coming in with kicks and trying to set things up so she can actually land her punches, which I think are kind of her money makers, her damage, shots, and, always looking for kind of her sneaky takedowns. I can't imagine she's going to try to test Shanna Young in the wrestling. It wouldn't make sense for her to do so. I think she'll outstrike her if she stays on the feet. I'm interested to see what happens if and when Young tries to take her down. I hope for Young's own sake that she doesn't just kind of hang out at range and try to kickbox with Maverick, because Maverick is a lot faster and Maverick is very used to fighting people with superior reach. But you pointed out that Young does not always fight to her own best advantage, whereas I think Maverick generally does. And I think this fight, unless Young really commits to the takedown, I think this fight is going to play out at a pace that's not going to test Maverick's gas tank too badly. I see Maverick winning a pretty straightforward decision here. I understand why the line is what it is, but I do agree with you that maybe it's not giving quite enough due credit to Shanna Young and how good she is. Next up on the UFC 278 prelims, we have somebody who was always the taller fighter. It is a 145-pound matchup. I still can't believe that this dude is a featherweight. It is a 145-pound matchup between Sean Woodson and Luis Saldana. Woodson, The 30-year-old Missouri native, 9-1 overall, 3-1 since joining the UFC out of the third season of Dana White's Contender Series. He is on a 2-fight win streak, those being a split decision win over Youssef Zalal last June and a first-round knockout of Colin Anglin last November at UFC Fight Night Holloway versus Rodriguez. It will have been about 9.5 months since that fight when he steps in against Saldana. Saldana, the 31-year-old Iowa native, is 16-7 overall. He is 2-1 since joining the UFC out of the fourth season of the Contender Series. On the Contender Series, he beat Vince Murdoch. Since then, he's been in the UFC. He beat Jordan Griffin in his debut, dropped his second fight to Austin Lingo, and most recently took a unanimous decision over Bruno Souza at UFC on ESPN Blades versus Dawkins in March. This one, yet another pretty wide line. Woodson minus 325 as the favorite. Saldana available at plus 275 as the substantial underdog. Keith, it's Dana White's Contender Series versus Dana White's Contender Series. It is tall versus extremely tall. It is Woodson versus Saldana. Who you got in this one?
Yeah, this is like a WWE matchup where like they put the two tall guys against each other. It's like the Undertaker versus the Big Boss Man and stuff like that. Like
I'm older. It's like for me, it's like Big John Studd versus King Kong Bundy. You know,
yeah.
Like,
Oh no, Andre. But he's Andre versus
yeah.
Big John. Yeah, the one guy that Big John had to look up to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is an intriguing matchup because of that. Woodson, I mean, he's the biggest human alive. I met him in Boston, and he like dwarfed me. And this guy, like you said, he's 145-pound guy. I was like looking up at like Robert Wadlow. I'm like, what the hell? I was like the, shout out.
Got a Guinness Book of World Records drop from Keith Schillen on the Schillen.
Oh, you like that, huh?
Yeah.
Listen,
I'm just happy to hear you talk about some other than Tom fucking Brady.
Yeah. Yes. Listen, when you throw out the word venomous, I had to go to Wikipedia and look up something. You can't be the only one with some brains around here. The dude's a killer striker. He really is. I mean, especially from the outside, very calm, very poised. You can tell he's put so many rounds in the boxing room because of that. Constantly getting his opponent guessing because he's switching stances, attacks one side, switches the other side. He's very accurate. He's got a great jab. He absolutely destroyed Colin Anglin with beautiful body shots. He can throw a high kick up so easily because of his height. When someone comes inside, he starts shortening everything up, so it's like killer uppercuts when you get inside. He has sting and pop. He doesn't hit as hard as you expect, but he's so accurate that he lands in the right spots, if that makes sense. The way to beat him is to pressure him and force him in close to get away from his long range shots. But you're gonna have to eat some shots in when you're coming in. He does fight. He backs up against the cage and fights in that range, which I hate that. I think he used that because I think he thinks it helps him defend takedowns. And if he's taken down, he can kind of walk back up. And if you try to take him down, he's been taken down before. That's kind of the avenue to beat him. But it's that tall man thing where you lift up like the single and he's still on his feet. And it's like, you usually have to lift the guy up this much. You have to lift him up, 4 more inches, 5 more inches to get him up, which is always aggravating if you ever wrestled a really tall guys. His sub defense does need improvement. Like we saw him get easily submitted by Julian Erosa, and he did gas in that fight. As we mentioned, he's 145-pounder. He always makes weight, but you still have to wonder like how much is that draining him? That should he be up in a weight class now? Saldana's he's an athletic guy. He's long and lengthy. You mentioned it himself. He's a kickboxer. He's a lot of movement. He uses movement well. He likes to kind of work from range, a little bit of an outfighter, but he has fast hands. Not a big power puncher. That's one issue with his boxing. Good kicks though. Targets the calves. He's not a wrestler, but he can find a way to get the fight to the ground. I mean, he took Bruno Souza down twice in their fight. He's got some weak defense himself, like going all the way back to the Jordan Griffin fight. He was taken out 4 times in that, which you don't like, especially against a guy like Jordan Griffin. But he can get submissions. He has got 4 submission wins. So as far as prediction goes, Saldana's best avenue of victory is to attack Woodson's legs, kick the legs out, maybe sneak in some takedowns. both are possible, but I just have a hard time going, against Woodson in an outside kickboxing game, which Saldana usually likes to work. You stay on the outside against Woodson, you're gonna get smashed. I can't see Saldana, who's usually the longer, taller guy, giving up 6 inches to a guy and having success. He's gonna have to make some huge adjustments. Woodson looked so good in his last fight. I think he does it again. Give me Woodson to work him on the feet, hurt him, and maybe even hurt him with a body shot, and I think he puts him out. Just give me Woodson by second round TKO.
Yeah, I like a lot of the kind of description you lay out there. Woodson, he is just a joy to watch. He's one of the most enjoyable strikers in the UFC to watch film on, and you know that one of my tendencies is when I'm watching, especially an up and coming fighter that's new to me, like he was a couple of years ago coming into the Contender Series. Who does this guy remind me of? Like, who is he a young version of, or a not quite as good version of, or the same way. I'd say Fletcher makes me think of a young Johnny Hendricks. Woodson, I'm not saying he's as good or will be as good, but when he's really flowing, it's like Max Holloway with some extra bad habits. Just
Max Holloway on stilts, though.
yeah. But the funny thing is, there was a time when Max Holloway was like one of the tallest guys in the division.
That's right.
Like
he's still one of the taller guys in the division.
But they ain't Sean Woodson.
Ripley's, believe it or not.
Yeah, Woodson has some issues. He has some issues that are going to need to be hammered out either at the drawing board with his coaches or by moving up to 155, depending on whether you're talking about, as you mentioned, his tendency to back into the cage, his occasional gas tank issues. I should mention, in the interest of accuracy, his fight with Erosa was at 150, but that wasn't because Woodson missed weight. It's because Erosa was stepping up on short notice. So Woodson, as you mentioned, he's made the contracted weight every time. Who knows what 10 kinds of hell he goes through in the sauna to do it, but he does it. He looked incredible against Colin Anglin. I think Luis Saldana is a lot better fighter than Colin Anglin. Part of that is that that was just a skill mismatch. But I do think he's going to be able to pull off a lot of the same things against Saldana. Just, it's a favorable style matchup for Woodson for the very reason you mentioned. Your route to victory against Sean Woodson is not to oblige him with a ranged kickboxing matchup. It's either to actually try to get him to the ground or at least crowd him and use feints to the point where his concern over being taken to the ground doesn't let him get into that flow and keep things at the distance that he wants. I don't know if Saldana is going to be able to do that. So I do think this is going to be a bit of a Woodson showcase. Give me Woodson to just put on a real pretty kickboxing display. Lots of his nice, long, snappy punches, probably busting Saldana up a little bit. He'll sneak in a few of those head kicks where he doesn't have to bring up his leg very far to go upside your chin with his shin. He's going to throw some of those that, even if Saldana gets his arm up to guard off him, they still hurt and they still impress the judges. So give me Woodson to win all 3 rounds in a pretty fun fight.
Ben, do we know who the shortest guy in the division is?
At 145?
Yeah. Regardless of who we need, like a stat person. These other guys do. They have someone in the back pull up, like ESPN can pull up a stat. Like, we need hey, Bobby, give us the shortest guy.
I don't know if he's the shortest, but we're talking about Colin Anglin. His last 2 fights in the UFC were back-to-back fights with Woodson and Melsik Baghdasaryan. And I made some comments, I think, on Twitter or on our recap. I'm like, dude, he's gotten knocked out by the tallest and shortest guys in the division back-to-back. I don't know if Melsik is, but he might be.
So Melsik needs to be the next guy, Sean. Regardless if he wins or loses, that's who Sean should fight. Just because I want to see if Sean, while they're fighting, if he'll put his hand on his head.
Just
they do when you fool around fighting with your son, and I put my hand on his head.
And he's windmilling his hands trying to reach you. That's amazing. If you're listening to this podcast on Spotify or the platform of your choice, you just missed Keith and I miming a Big Brother fight. It was pretty good. Next up, we have a women's bantamweight matchup: Yanan and Lucie Pudilova. Keith and I talked a little bit off the top about this card and the quality of this card and how much car lot appeal it has. And if it sounds like we were a little harsh on it, just keep in mind that, as we try to say every time, we judge these on a different standard than a free fight night card. Because a free fight night card, it's like, well, what the hell else are you going to do? Watch it. Some of the lightest cards on paper end up being absolute bangers.
Yeah.
But when you're either asking people to pay $75 to watch a batch of fights, or it's the undercard that's running up to the point where you're going to ask them to pay $75, like it's like the free sample. You're at the food court, they got that little chunk of chicken on the toothpick, that they're trying to get you to go order from their restaurant.
I can't walk by one without eating one.
Oh, if you do a couple laps, you get a whole lunch out of it.
Even if I just ate like at the Popeyes or the Papagenos in the same court, I'm still gonna go grab one anyways.
yeah. But you walk around and like the Chinese place will give you a chunk of chicken, the Cajun place will give you a chunk of chicken, the Mexican place, they all taste the same. I mean, I imagine there's just one big kitchen behind there, but hey, you get 3 different chunks of chicken. Anyway, this fight, again, as currently scheduled, this is second from the top of the prelims, and it is a woman who is 1-4 in the UFC and a woman who is 2-5 in the UFC. And granted, Pudilova is being brought back after being cut and winning some fights back in Europe, but this doesn't have a whole lot of curb appeal. Like, this is not an appetizing chunk of chicken, second from the top. Gotta stop talking about chicken. Wu, the 26-year-old from China, 13-5 overall. As mentioned, 1-4 in the UFC, and if that doesn't sound all that great, keep in mind that she's 0-3 at bantamweight. She debuted at flyweight. She went 1-1 against Gina Mazzani and Lauren Mueller, and in hindsight, that was kind of the high watermark of her UFC run. Since then, she's lost to Mizuki Inoue, Jocelyn Edwards, and Mayra Bueno Silva. The most recent of those, the Silva fight, was in April at UFC on ESPN, Luque versus Muhammad 2. She's lost 3 straight. She's going to try her best not to make it 4 against Pudilova. Pudilova, the 28-year-old from the Czech Republic, 13-7 overall. She is 2-5 in the UFC. Unlike Wu, it does sound a little better if you take just her bantamweight run into consideration. She's 2-2 at bantamweight. But nonetheless, she exited the UFC 2.5 years ago on the back of 4 straight losses. Went home to the Czech Republic, signed up with Octagon MMA, which is the best Czech promotion, and went 4-1 with just the one loss to Toledo Bernardo, and then wins over, not top level competition, but nonetheless did enough to get her signed again. So she is a second chancer in a world where Juliana Rosa is thriving. Never say never, but she's actually favored here. She's -160, Wu +130 on the comeback. Keith, I'm not going to even lead in with a question about are these women UFC material, because one has already proven not to be and is trying to change our minds, and one is really just on the cusp. Who stays safe for the moment on Saturday?
Yeah, while you're talking this, I don't know why I thought about this. I was thinking about the issues we have with the sound. Did I tell you I have a German friend that is a sound tech guy, and I have a Czech one too.
I'm gonna stick a laugh track in here like some early '80s sitcom just for you. That's.
I heard that joke this week. I laughed about 20 minutes straight. I like that you already do it. Listen, you can't be on the local rock scene.
Yeah, that joke. I'm a musician. I've heard that one a few times. I knew it was coming.
Yeah. Oh, I heard that joke. I laughed for about 20 minutes. Anyways.
But I'm kind of like, Rudy running in for the touchdown. I'm not going to ruin your moment, man. I let you take that one. I guess Rudy didn't score. He just got like a big tackle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But
he could have scored with that girl until he got drunk at the bar and started talking about the old has-beens, old guys. Remember he was talking about like, oh, hey, there's Peter Smithenworth. He scored 4 touchdowns in 1955 Sugar Bowl.
Rudy,
like, come on, dude. Anyways,
put on gargoyle music and get laid, Rudy.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, at least his brother was getting some with Rudy's old girlfriend. We're ruining Rudy for anybody. Anyways, back to this fight. This fight is not good. Not good at all. Lucie Pudilova. I'll say this about her. Welcome back, Lucie. She, if you dig into her UFC record, I mean, she had a split decision against Irene Aldana, which has aged really well. I mean, if we're giving credit off a loss, I mean, her other loss to Liz Carmouche, Bellator champion, getting choked out by Antoina Shevchenko. I can't find much there. I'm trying.
The wins over Ji Yeon Kim and Sarah Morris, to put it mildly, have not aged well.
No, and then she lost to Justine Kish, who Bellator thought it was a good idea to have her fight Deanna Bennett, lose to Deanna Bennett, and then do an automatic rematch that nobody asked for and lose again. Anyways.
And blow away by 6 pounds.
Yeah. I guess I can't prolong talking about this fight. Pudilova is big for the weight class. She's a boxer. Good movement, a lot of L stepping. She uses feints well. Lots of, and this is all stuff I've been watching her since she left the UFC.
Yeah.
Watched a lot of tape. She actually looks like she's improved. A lot of jabs. She throws straight shots down the pipe. She's actually has the ability to strike while being pressured backing up, which I do like. She's a really weak defensive wrestler, though. She has 2 submission wins, but her last submission win was six years ago. And as we just mentioned, she was submitted by Antoina Shevchenko, which is really bad. Now, Wu, to her credit, she's big for the weight class too. She's a serviceable striker, I'll say. But she's kind of slow. She has low output, which is not good. Like, to be a minus athlete and not have output, which is not good. She also uses feints well. We might have like these two just feinting at each other a lot. She moves, good movement, good kicks. She's not much of a wrestler. She is a submission threat. I mean, she subbed Lauren Mueller, who actually, believe it or not, Lauren Mueller had a little bit of buzz heading into the UFC until she actually had to fight. And she almost submitted Mizuki Inoue in a standing guillotine, which I like that. This fight is really bad. Both fighters are pretty bad. The loser's probably getting cut, especially if it's Wu. If she gets cut, they might give Pudilova a little bit more leash, being that's she's returned. Like I said, I actually think Pudilova has improved a little bit since her last fight. I say she outworks Wu on the feet. I say she cruises to an easy victory. I'll say Pudilova by decision. What'd you say the odds were? Is she the favorite?
She is. She's minus 160, Wu plus 130.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, so I'm taking favorite in this one.
I'm glad there's a particular thing you said there, because I was so busy dunking on this fight and on this card that I forgot to ask you the setup question I had, which was, do you think Lucie Pudilova has improved in the 2.5 years since she was cut from the UFC, or she just looks better because she's fighting bad opposition?
Yeah,
but
it could be. It could be that. Well, it could be that too. It's easy to look good when you're facing bad opposition, but like she couldn't have got worse. Like,
yeah, that's true. Some fighters get booted from the UFC, stop giving a shit, and they become even worse when they go back to the regionals. That's not been the case for Pudilova, because I watched her fights and I cautiously thought, it's like, she looks better than I remember her looking, but of course she looks better against these fighters than she did against Liz Carmouche and Irene Aldana. So I'm glad that you seem to think also that she's refined her skills a little bit, and that's to be expected. It's worth noting that she's only 28. I expected her to be a little older, just because, again, she was cut from the UFC. She was cut from the UFC before COVID, which makes it feel like 8 years ago. It was like, after losing in January of 2020. Maybe that time off was the best thing for her, because she probably wouldn't have gotten 6 fights in the UFC over that same span of time, but just going home to the Czech Republic and being the best fighter in their division, she got to stay pretty busy. Maybe she has gotten a little bit better. No matter what, I think I favor her over Wu. Just Wu, you guys, if you're listening to this, if you've listened before, my cliche when I'm talking about a borderline fighter, where I ask, okay, is this a fighter that they do 1 or 2 things at a UFC level and they're just not a good athlete, or they just have huge holes in their game, or is it someone who arguably doesn't do anything at a UFC level? Wu is close to being in the other category. I mean, she's good size for the weight class, as Keith mentioned, and she has decent physical strength that goes along with that. She's not really been ragdolled or bullied too badly, even by big fighters like Mayura Bueno Silva and Jocelyn Edwards. But yeah, she's slow. She's low volume, which makes her not a round winner. And she doesn't have the kind of power, at least at the UFC level, that makes her this magic equalizer. Nobody is ever going to say Wu Yanan only has to touch her chin once. Like, that's something that's never going to escape from the mouth of a UFC analyst. So, barring something freakish happening, I see Pudilova just winning a pretty straightforward kickboxing match thanks to better volume. I think it's as simple as that. Probably won't be a sizzling fight. Neither of their fights generally tend to be. And it's kind of rough for Wu Yanan that she's finally getting some kind of break this late in the game, because you can argue that she's lost 4 fights in the UFC, and the general direction has been for her to get more difficult opponents each time. Like from Mazani to Mizuki to Jocelyn Edwards to Mayura Bueno Silva, who's currently in the Sherdog rankings at bantamweight. Like, they keep responding to her losing by giving her tougher fights. She's finally getting a bit of a break here, but I don't think it'll be enough of one. Give me Lucie Pudilova to vindicate the UFC's decision to bring her back with a decision win here. Next up at UFC 278, and at least as the card is currently ordered, the top prelim is a lightweight matchup featuring Leonardo Santos and Jared Gordon, two gentlemen who probably have to send Grant Dawson Father's Day cards every year. Santos, the 42-year-old Brazilian, is 18-5-1 overall. He is 7-2-1 since joining the UFC as the winner of the second season of The Ultimate Fighter Brazil. 7-2-1 sounds very good. The bad news is that the 2 losses are his last 2 fights. After opening his UFC run with a pretty scorching series of performances, he has had a change of luck starting last year. Dawson knocked him out in the 3rd round at UFC on ESPN Brunson versus Holland last March. He came back last December and got choked out by the ghost of Clay Guida. That was at UFC on ESPN Font versus Aldo. He'll try to make it not 3 straight, try to turn things around as the oldest man in the division. Standing in his way will be Gordon. The 33-year-old New Yorker is 18-5 overall. He is 6-4 since joining the UFC as the outgoing CFFC featherweight champ. He lost his last time out. It was a 3rd round submission loss to Dawson. That put the brakes on a 3-fight win streak for him. Those coming against Chris Fishgold, Danny Chavez, and Joe Selecki. So 2 gentlemen that had lengthy win streaks ended by Dawson. One or the other of them will get to start a new one. Gordon is heavily favored to be the one who does. He is -320, Santos +240. Keith, Leonardo Santos, 42 years old, getting it done at lightweight. That's kind of a remarkable thing. I mean, we think it's pretty remarkable that Glover Teixeira is still one of the top light heavyweights in the world at 42, and that is a much bigger division, and he's a guy whose game never really ran on being the fastest dude in the division anyway. I mean, he was an old man when he was 28. Leonardo Santos was and is a plus athlete in a plus athlete division, and he's still competing at 42.
One guy's winning championship, the other guy's competing.
He's competing. But I mean, at 40, he was like banging on the outer edge of the top 10. You know, he'd won 5 straight. That Dawson fight was definitely for a spot in the rankings. Like, it took a while for the wheels to fall off of Santos's wagon. Does he get a measure of redemption here against Gordon, or does the misery continue?
This is tough. This is really tough because I don't know what's left of Santos. He looks really bad in the last fight. Now, good Santos, what we've seen is somewhat recently, long jab, he got very slip and rip style, decent power. I mean, it's going way back when he knocked out Kevin Lee. He knocked out Stevie Ray. Those are 2 really good wins. Again, he's also been very inactive about Leonardo Santos. He's been out for long stretches, so I do have to kind of go back. But he has that like fade back right hand. That's what he caught Stevie Ray with. Makes some mistakes. He keeps his chin really high. He backs straight up. He does have a lot of kicks, and he throws a lot of them because he doesn't care if you take him down, because this is a 4-time world champion in BJJ, and his jiu-jitsu is really good. He will shoot for takedowns, but all these things I said about him was like I was saying the fight previously to his last fight. That all fall apart in his last fight against Clay Guida. I mean, he looked like he was shot. I mean,
Clay Guida is shot, and Guida ran circles around him.
And it was just his cardio. Like at first he looked great. Santos was putting it on him, and then all of a sudden it was just like it was like he was hit with like a tranquilizer dart. Suddenly he was like slow motion. And what's it? Is it old school where what's his name? Will Ferrell gets hit with a tranquilizer, everything starts going slow. Like that was like Santos. Like what happened to him? I mean, he gassed out so quickly against Clay Guida. Now Jared Gordon, he's a minus athlete himself, but he's pretty technically sound. He has high output. He's a boxer. He keeps everything inside. He likes to work the body. He had really good volume against Danny Chavez. He has a lot of defensive holds, though. He backs straight up. He drops his hands. He pillars. He's an underrated wrestler. He's a good grappler. I mean, he out-grappled the BJJ black belt and Chris Fishgold fairly easily, which was really surprising to me. He showed some great top game, and he's got really good ground and pound. So as far as prediction goes, if Santos had cardio, like if I never saw the Clay Guida fight, I probably would have took Santos. If he could find a way to conserve it, skill-wise, I think he's much better than Gordon, even at this age. But I just expect Gordon to beat him up everywhere after – a couple minutes in. I expect like Gordon's going to have to survive. Like I could see Santos catches him trying to jump onto a guillotine or rear naked choke or something like that, taking him down, taking his back, whatever, like putting him in bad positions. But if we're starting the second round, I'm taking Gordon and start taking over. So I'll say he survives an early attack, starts beating up in the second round, and by the third round, he knocks him out. Give me Gordon by third round TKO.
I'm not going to add much to this because there's not much to add. You outlined specifically what I think Santos's problem is going to be, and that's that his gas tank has abandoned him. And Gordon, I mean, he ran up against the wall in Grant Dawson, but Jared Gordon right now is probably the best version of himself he's ever been. I mean, before that, he'd won 3 straight, and none of them were world beaters, but they were all, decent fighters. At this point, he's 33. He's been in a lot of fights, but he's not been in a lot of blood and guts wars, and he's still, for the most part, only lost to very, very good fighters. Yeah, like Jared Gordon is whatever the top Jared Gordon is, he's probably still that, whereas Santos is just in rapid decline. He looked so much worse against Guida than he did against Dawson, even though Dawson, obviously a much better fighter than Guida at this point in their respective development. I can only imagine that at 42, heading towards 43, that slide is going to continue while Gordon is staying steady. I'm with you. Even if this is competitive early, Gordon's going to take over around could be around the 4-minute mark if it's anything like the Guida fight, but maybe around the 7-minute mark. And from there, it's going to be mostly a question of whether Santos survives. So did you say Gordon by third round finish?
Yeah, third round TKO.
I hate to be unoriginal, but I'm leaning the same way. Gordon by third round TKO, and it might be one of those things we've seen a few times recently, most recently in Lamwer versus Onama, where things like Gordon hurts Santos, goes to the ground. Gordon's smart enough to just stand up and wave Santos back up, and it takes him longer to stand up each time. But yeah, kind of a demoralizing, possibly. Well, no spoilers, but this recap might end up having the longest cut list of any Shilton and Duffy recap of a pay-per-view card. Our apologies if you heard at the very end of that last segment, Lola the dog giving her final 2 cents about the undercard of UFC 278. But here we kick off the main card. It starts with a 205-pound matchup between Tyson Pedro and Harry Hunsucker. Pedro, the 30-year-old Australian, is 8-3 overall. He is 4-3 in the UFC. He won his last time out. It was a late first round TKO of Ike Villanueva at UFC Fight Night Lemos versus Andrade. That was back in April. Prior to that, it had been 3.5 years since he fought. He was one of that little vanguard of oceanic fighters, Australia, New Zealand fighters that joined the UFC. He was moderately successful. He went 3-3, but made the successful return against Hurricane Ike. He's going to try to make it 2 straight here against Hunsucker. Harry Hunsucker, 33-year-old from Kentucky, is 7-5 overall. He is 0-2 since joining the UFC as a veteran, though not a signee, of the fourth season of Dana White's Contender Series. He lost to Jared Vandera on the Contender Series, went back to Kentucky, punched out Corey Moon in about 45 seconds, then was signed to the UFC, where he has notched back-to-back first-round losses against Tai Tuivasa and Justin Tafa. The most recent of those, the Tafa fight, was back in December of 2021. Since then, Hunsucker has made the decision to go from being the worst heavyweight on the UFC roster to try and become a 2-division worst fighter in the UFC by becoming the worst light heavyweight. This will be him dropping to 205 for the first time in his career. We'll see if he gets it done, but he's had a good 8 months and change to work on it. He is not favored to win, whether he makes weight or not. As of right now, lines are all over the place, but a good median would be Tyson Pedro at -850, Harry Hunsucker plus 525. Now,
850?
Keith Qileng and I, we are not a comedy duo. It is not our job to set one another up. We're not delivering punchlines here. We're just 2 guys that like to talk about fights and have some cultural references. But in this case, all I'm going to do is lay out those odds and hand it over to Keith for one of his patented lines.
Tyson Pedro shouldn't be a -850 favorite against anybody. That's what you wanted, man.
Yes, it is.
I just want to remind people that Tyson Pedro, and I just know this because I watched the fight today. Tyson Pedro was a -500 favorite against Shogun and got knocked out. I mean, I know his ankle rolled on him and this and that, but he also got pounded out in the second round before that happened. Sorry about my dog barking. She's a really big fan of Harry Hunsucker, so she was getting really excited as we were kicking off the main card with a guy that's, would you say, he's 7-5 record?
Yep.
Yeah, so he's started the pay-per-view. He hasn't won a fight in the UFC. Let's kick off the pay-per-view. Tyson Pedro is a big dude. He really is. I mean, I was watching his fight against Shogun, and he looked like a whole weight class bigger than Shogun. He's a counter striker that he's pretty elusive. He uses a lot of feints, like almost too much feints. He's got low output with it because he throws more feints than strikes. He's your basic 1-2 serviceable kind of combination boxer. Decent kicks. He hurt Ike Villanueva with kicks. He keeps his chin way too high for my liking. He backs straight up on the sound line, which I don't like. He will wrestle, but he's not good at it. He's a really weak defensive wrestler. I mean, he was getting thrown around by Shogun, out wrestled by not even Shogun, the ghost of Shogun, who was never really known for his grappling. Yeah, I know he was Brazilian, just your black belt. He got a submission over against Kevin Rayleman like 200 years ago. Big deal. But it's not good to be getting out grappled by Shogun. I mean, he struggles if he's put on the bottom. He has a submission threat. I'll give him that. He has 5 subs on his record, but he also gassed out against Shogun. Move over to Harry Hunsucker. I said this when I was doing the Contender Series preview. He beat like the lowest level regional fighters you'll ever seen. I mean, I said it last time. These are guys that made Butterbean look like Sage Northcutt. Like, that's how bad these guys are. The dude's a lower level guy. I mean, he's very aggressive. He sits on his punches, but his striking is gross. I mean, he just reaches, overextends himself. He keeps his chin high in the air, which is a huge target. He throws push kicks and low kicks, which I like. He hasn't showed anything on the ground. He will look for takedown attempts, but 0 setups, 0 ability to get it there. And his cardio isn't good. So I think it's good for Harry Hunsucker to go down to 205. I really do. I think it's more good for his health than it is for his competitive career. Like, I don't think it's going to matter, but might pull his cholesterol down some points, get his blood pressure down. So that's always good. Make him look a little more appealing to Mrs. Hunsucker, which is nice. But I'm not sold on Pedro. But Pedro's gonna wreck this dude. He's gonna pick him apart from range. He's gonna jab him up. He's gonna leg kick him. He's probably gonna hurt him. I picture like a club and sub type kind of finish. Give me Pedro by first round submission.
Yeah, I mean, you know me. I'm generally a positive, optimistic, and encouraging guy. Like, I don't generally dunk on fighters very hard. Like, I already feel bad for what I just said about Harry Hunsucker 5 minutes ago now. Like, I was like, should I have said that? But even by my usual standard of what does this guy do at a UFC level? I mean, I said about Jared Vanderaa, like, I don't know anything he does at a UFC level other than be huge, but that was enough to destroy Harry Hunsucker. Like, Harry Hunsucker has had 4 fights against UFC level opponents, like Tuivasa and Tafa in the UFC, Vanderaa on the Contender Series, and Don'Tale Mayes back in Kentucky. And the longest he made it with any of them was 3.5 minutes with Vanderaa. And that's because it was on the Contender Series, so they both had to constantly keep pulling their shorts back up because of the Contender Series. His win against Corey Moon in between the Vanderaa and Tuivasa fights is his only career win over a guy with a winning record. You talked about the level of competition he faced. I mean, I'm sure we'll get an angrily worded letter from the Kentucky Judo Federation.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it's rough. And it's nothing against Harry Hunsucker. He's being the best fighter he can be. And you know what? If I could get signed to the UFC and make 12-12, okay, let's be honest, 12 for getting beat up by Tuivasa and Justin Tafa, I'd do it in a heartbeat too, and I wouldn't apologize to a fucking person. Like, I'm not turning this into an anti-Harry Hunsucker thing. He is just a symptom of, one, how bad heavyweight is, even in the best promotion in the world. 2, what the Contender Series brings to the UFC, especially in the thinner divisions, pun fully intended. And 3, kind of what the UFC was reduced to having to do during the COVID era in terms of bringing people in on short notice. All those things worked in Hunsucker's favor, but he's really not ever even shown flashes against his opponents. Here, I mean, a 33-year-old dropping from heavyweight to light heavyweight for the first time, that doesn't inspire confidence. He's typically weighed in at around 240, 245 for his fights in the regionals as well as in the UFC. It's been a consistent thing. He's always been around 245. So saying, okay, he needs to drop to maybe 220 or 222, so it's like a doable water cut, that's still a lot of doing for a guy in his mid-30s. If he makes weight, I think he's not going to be the best version of himself. And this is all to meet Tyson Pedro. And Tyson Pedro is a guy with some decent offensive weapons and just huge lapses in defense and fight IQ. Like, Shogun Hua knocked him out after tossing him around. Ovin St. Preux got the best of probably the most fun 3-minute fight of 2018 and slapped an Americana on him or something. Like, whatever you do, you can do it to Tyson Pedro, unless he does it to you first. He's kind of like the light heavyweight Julian Erosa that way, where he's like, this fight's going to end up on a highlight reel, whether it's mine or yours. I can't believe he's got a win over Paul Craig.
Yeah. I wouldn't pick it now, though.
And no, I wouldn't pick him against Khalil Rountree either. And he beat Khalil. I don't know why I'm still talking about this fight. Tyson Pedro, round 1 knockout.
Dude, you said his best win is over Corey Moon. I just wanted to look it up to see if it fit my theory. And listen, I don't like to call people fat because I could lose some weight myself. I know that. I like to shout out on some Santoro's pizza a little too much than I should. Hey, shout out to any pizza companies though. Like if anybody wants to sponsor this show, like I'll eat a full pizza while we're doing the show. Like I don't know what's the national chains out there, like a Pizza Hut or Domino's or Papagenos. Is it Papagenos? Is that national? Is that you guys have Papagenos or is that
No, I think that's
you don't
I
have
think that's
Papagenos?
local to you. No,
Papa John's. Was it Papa John's? Yeah, Papa John's with Peyton Manning and all that. Yeah. Dude, you want to sponsor us, dude? I'll eat that pizza down. I'll say it's the greatest pizza in the world. So just throw that out there. Like, trust me, as a fat guy, I'd love it. But dude, look up Corey Moon. Like, Google him. I mean, it would have been more impressive if he beat up like Keith Moon, Warren Moon, freaking Buster Moon from the Sing movie. Like, I'll go the other side. I'll go the Corey out, like Corey Feldman, Corey Haim, Corey from Boy Meets World. Like, what? Like, no, like the guy
Corey from Slipknot. You know, he got like the spikes coming out of his rubber mask.
There's no way this Corey Moon guy isn't over 300 pounds. Just no. Sorry. Maybe Tyson Pedro should be a negative 850 favorite.
The UFC 278 main card powers on with a heavyweight matchup. And for as much as Keith and I have kind of dunked on this card and had some fun at its expense and made some sincere criticism of it, I'll say this, at least it's one heavyweight matchup on the main card. It's not an unranked heavyweight matchup. It's actually a ranked one and, you know, kind of important. It is Marcin Tybura versus Alexander Romanov. Tybura, the 36-year-old from Poland, is 22-7 overall. He is 9-6 in the UFC. He lost his last time out. It was a unanimous decision against Alexander Volkov back at UFC 267 last Halloween weekend. That for Tybura put the brakes on a 5-fight win streak. He had beaten, coming into that, Sergey Spivak, Maxim Grishin, Ben Rothwell, Greg Hardy, and Walt Harris. From that Volkov loss, he's going to try to get back in the W column, start up a new streak. Against Romanov, the 31-year-old Moldovan is a perfect 16-0 as a professional. He is a perfect 5-0 since joining the UFC almost exactly 2 years ago. He has beaten Roque Martinez, Marco Sergio de Lima, Juan Espino, Jared Vandera, and Chase Sherman. The most recent of those, the Sherman fight, was a first-round key lock submission at UFC on ESPN, Font versus Vera. For what it's worth, Sherman did step up on short notice for that one. Romanov, as you might expect, given their relative momentum, is a pretty strong favorite here. He's minus 360, Tybura plus 270 as the underdog. I will say this much for this fight. I understand why Romanov is a big favorite. He's got the 0. And not only has he got the 0, he has absolutely smashed everyone he's fought in the UFC except for Juan Espino. The Espino fight was weird. If you don't remember it, it's one where he got the best of the first round over Espino. Espino probably got the better of the second round. Both guys were tired in the third, but Romanov was more tired, and Romanov took a foul and just literally asked, if I can't go on, will this go to a decision, or will I be TKO'd, or will it be a DQ? He basically weighed his options before not being able to go on and ended up winning a technical split decision over Espino. Fair play to him. Some people feel different ways about it, think maybe it wasn't a good look, but that's the only thing that's had more effect on Alexander Romanov in his UFC run, more effect than a stiff breeze. He has blown through everybody else. So I understand why he's a 3.5 to 1 favorite. Having said that, I think this has upset potential and trap fight kind of written all over it.
Mm-hmm.
This is a gigantic step up in competition for Alexander Romanov. Alexander Romanov, I mean, the Espino fight, Espino was kind of a weird flash in the pan because he was so old for the kind of prospect level guy he was. He, was on that season of The Ultimate Fighter and then, won a couple, lost a couple, retired really quickly. He's better than everybody else Romanov has fought. Roque Martinez, gone. Marco Sergio de Lima, still around, but you couldn't get a fighter more tailor-made for Alexander Romanov because Marco Sergio de Lima might have the worst ground game in the heavyweight division. Jared Vandera, we've talked about him a little bit. And then, short notice Chase Sherman. To go from those guys to Marcin Tybura, who is absolutely a top 15, if not top 10 fighter, and has generally not been an easy out for even the opponents who've beaten him. That's a huge test, and it's a huge test on strictly competitive grounds. Like Tybura is probably the second best striker Romanov has faced after Marcos Rogerio de Lima. Only Tybura can wrestle a little bit as well and isn't a complete dead fish when he's taken down. And then specifically in terms of a stylistic matchup, because what Romanov has done in his fights is his nickname is King Kong, and that's about right. He's wrestled the living bejesus out of all of his opponents, just slamming them all over the place, kind of unnecessarily high amplitude takedowns. And Keith and I have both said on previews and recaps of his fights, this is a whole lot of fun to watch, but he's going to run into a guy where overexpending his energy this way is going to cost him. It almost cost him against Espino, who was a bigger guy and a very good wrestler himself. He's from Canary Islands. I think he was like a Senegalese style wrestler, but like a heavy squat guy that was hard to move, and Romanov tried to do it anyway. If he tries to throw around, 6'5" or 6'4", 255-pound Marcin Tybura, it's going to look like the Espino fight, only worse, because Espino's a better overall fighter, more durable, and it'll be a thing where Romanov, he wins the first round 10-9, but everybody sees where this is going. So I think of this as an ideal test of Romanov's prospect upside. Can he make adjustments? Can he make adjustments in advance? Can he and his team realize, okay, we need to do something different against Tybura? Or is he only going to learn his lesson afterwards, and will they be able to make the adjustments at that point? I like this matchup for that reason. And again, neither Keith nor I are bettors. We're definitely not professional bettors. Neither of us are regular bettors. I don't think Keith bets at all. I basically never do. I did give Mike Jackson a bottle of wine today when I saw him at Fury.
I bet when we're sponsored.
Yeah. And we're generally not a betting advice podcast. There are better people for that, including at Sherdog. But if I were, Tybura at plus 270 is really, really tasty, because Romanov has not proven that he can go 3 rounds with anybody, let alone a durable and well-rounded big guy like Marcin Tybura. Again, I'm going to step out on a limb here and say that Romanov is kind of feeling himself, kind of believing the hype. Because the thing is, Romanov, his approach has been the same across his UFC run, but his physical tools have gotten better. Like, he has visibly gotten in better shape as he's gone along. It's kind of like Sergey Spivak. He went from being this kind of just like hulking dude. He wasn't fat, but he was just kind of, like a big dude to he's
burly guy.
Yeah, he's getting almost ripped. But yeah, he used to just kind of look like some, Greco guy you'd see in the Olympics, where, he didn't really have a weight limit. So he's like, I'd be 260 pounds lean, but why not just be 285 with a little bit of meat on me? He's starting to look a little ripped.
Rulon Gardner type.
Yeah. Rulon Gardner. Like, that man had some jiggle.
He's on his way, though, to Alexander Karelin. He's going that direction.
Yes. And I think he's going to go in there, and he's going to try to use the same approach on Tybura. And I think it's going to work until it doesn't. Give me Marcin Tybura to win a decision going away here. I'm not going to say he gets the finish. Never mind. What am I talking about? I'm thinking now of the end of the Espino fight. Marcin Tybura, round 3 TKO.
Nice. I think you're going to say, all right, I'll take Romanov by technical decision. Yeah, dude, I like how you broke that fight down a lot. I agree with a lot of things, man. I'll get to my, usually I break down the fighters. I'll say this, usually I kind of go to my prediction. I'm going to say this. I'm really on the fence with this fight. I don't agree with the odds. I flip-flopped all week. Yeah, so I like how you're going. I agree with you. If you're betting, I agree. I think Tybura is the way to go, and I'm interested to see what Jay Petrie says, if he puts that in his betting column, if he likes Tybura. So make sure you check that out when it comes out.
He's off this week. He
Oh,
says it's
so
because
there
he
you go.
has a wedding to go to this weekend, but I think it's because he just didn't want to do odds on like Wu versus Pudilova.
Yeah. Okay. So all right. So you can't check that out, but Sean Sheehan usually does like his best bets. I wonder if this would be on his best bets. Sean Sheehan is really good at that stuff. So make sure you check that out. That's also on the YouTube page. So if you haven't checked that out, Sean does really good work. He likes to call us lads, so I like that too. Tybura, he's really well rounded. That's the thing that stands out to me. Like he's on the feet. Like you were talking about his striking, and I agree. On the feet, he's high output, decent hand speed. He likes just to march down his foes. Uses a lot of like front kicks to back his opponents up. He uses striking to kind of get him in the range where he wants, and kind of uses striking to follows that in to close the distance. He wants to force his opponent back because he doesn't really like being pressured himself. But when he closes the distance, he can wrestle too. He can grind against the fence. He'll work like an underhook, hold his opponent against there, grueling, wear down his opponent. He'll drop down on like a single, run the pipe, get the fight to the ground, or he'll catch a kick. He has a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, decent top control. He has 6 submission wins. Like there's a lot of things I like about Tybura. The one negative stands out to me. He's not like the one thing that keeps, in my opinion, keeping Tybura from like the next level up is his athleticism. He's not an elite. He's not the surreal gun. That's like the only thing he's missing, you know. And he doesn't have that like he's a good striker, but he doesn't have crushing heavyweight power like a Derek Lewis or something like that. So that's like what's holds it back. Romanov, he's a southpaw who I do agree that his striking is coming along. But there's some holes. I mean, Marcos Rogério de Lima, you mentioned, is being the best striker he went against. He was kicking his legs out before getting taken down. Romanov makes no what's the word I'm looking for? Like he doesn't try to hide what he wants to do. He wants to close the distance and he's going to grind. He likes upper body takedowns, lateral drops, bear hugs, headlocks, like things I don't like, but he's really good at it. He will shoot on the hips, drive through. He's incredibly strong. I mean, he suplexed Chase Sermon in their last fight. Good top control. I like that he's advanced in position on the ground. Really good ground and pound. He's a legit submission threat. He's got 9 submission wins. This fight simply comes down to whether Tybura can stop Romanov's takedowns, and by stopping him, he's making him like waste more and more energy and then kind of take over. I really like your breakdown on the feet. Tybura, I think he really batters him up on the outside. Tybura hasn't been taken down in 4 years. So if he can use his movement and jab him up and low kick, he could really cruise to a victory. Or as you said, get like a late stoppage, turn it up the volume. I was taking Tybura. I really was until today. And then I said, you know what? Until I see someone stop Romanov's takedowns, I'm going to keep picking him. So I want to take Romanov by decision, but dude, negative 350, negative 400, close to that. I'm not feeling that at all. Like I think it should be like a negative 130 favorite or something like that. So as you mentioned, the bettors didn't, or the handicappers, whatever you call it, whatever the guys who set the line. As you can tell, I don't bet. Romanov, like they're not taking in his level of competition. This is a massive step up. So I'll take Romanov by decision, but I think you might be onto something on this one. I think you might be pounding your chest a little bit on this one.
We'll find out. Third from the top of the UFC 278 main card is a high-stakes bantamweight matchup between Jose Aldo and Merab Dvalishvili. Aldo, the 35-year-old Brazilian, is 31-7 overall. He is 13-6 in the UFC. He is 21-6 if you include his undefeated 8-fight run in the WEC, which you absolutely should, since his featherweight division was absorbed wholesale into the UFC, and he was grandfathered in as the UFC's first featherweight champ. So that's 21-6. He is 3-2 since dropping to bantamweight. An unlikely, unexpected, unforeseen run of success that has seen the man from Manaus only add to an already all-timer legendary resume, just building on his case to be considered one of the 5 greatest fighters that's ever done it. He is on a 3-fight win streak right now since losing to Petr Yan 2 years ago. He has beaten Marlon Vera, Pedro Munoz, and Rob Font. The most recent of those, the Font fight, was last December in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 31. So returning for the first time in about 8 or 9 months, in his way is the owner of the longest win streak in the bantamweight division. On a night that we've talked about Leon Edwards, on a night that we've talked about John Fitch, Merab Dvalishvili, the man perpetually waiting for that title shot. 31-year-old from Georgia by way of Long Island is 14-4 overall. He is 7-2 in the UFC. He lost his debut to Frankie Saenz by split decision. He lost his second fight to Ricky Simon in controversial fashion that I imagine will come up during the next 10 minutes. Since then, he has won 7 straight fights over Terrion Ware, Brad Katona, Casey Kenny, Gustavo Lopez, John Dodson, Cody Stamen, and Marlon Moraes. The most recent of those, the Moraes win, was last September, almost exactly 11 months ago at UFC 266. He knocked out Moraes in the second round after a wild fight where both of them hurt the other. But that was his first finish in this 7-fight run, which might contribute to him having been slow-rolled so badly. Who knows if this will be the final step. He is the slight favorite to find out whether it is or not, as right now he is minus 120. Aldo even money plus 100 in the closest fight on the books at UFC 278. Keith, whoever wins this fight is, I mean, the bantamweight title picture is it's that airport with 6 hijacked jets flying around it. I mean, whoever wins is going to be sitting with Marlon Vera and watching what happens in Sterling versus Dillashaw, obviously. But who gets it done here? Like, who kind of makes his case to be the next guy?
Yeah, this is a really intriguing fight. This is probably stylistically my favorite fight on the card because there's so many question marks. Jose Aldo obviously is one of the greatest fighters of all time, legendary. It's so hard to read him right now because he's continued winning fights, though he obviously has lost some stuff. He's lost some step, but and down in weight class. But he's a massive bantamweight. I mean, he was a massive featherweight, so never mind that bantamweight. He's a big dude. He's a pressure counter striker that still has some good power at his age. He keeps his hands really tight. Everything short. Works behind a really nice jab, is straight right, follows up. He's always been one of the best punches in MMA history. He's probably the best mid-range striker in MMA history. He's really good at just holding his ground, not taking a step back. He beat up Jeremy Stevens to the body, beat up Renato Moicano with body shots, which I love. I love the guy that he throws kicks to set up his power punches instead of the other way around. A lot of guys will throw punches and then finish with kicks. He'll lead with the kick and then kind of follow up with like kick to the right side, follow up with the right like hook over the top, kicks to the body. For a long time, he abandoned kicks, like especially calf kicks. But it's starting to, like going back to the Patreon, like he started throwing more kicks and it's starting to become a little bit more part of his game again, which was his number one weapon as his rise up the rankings. The chin is a little questionable. Now, he got hurt by Conor McGregor forever ago, but I mean, the 2 wars against Max Holloway, the war against Chad Mendes, the output that Yanan put on him, plus his age, plus these other, Volkanovski fights, they're going to catch up to him. And you just wonder when it's going to be. When is he going to get hit with a shot that doesn't even look that good, but puts him out? It wouldn't shock me if it's even like a Merab who does that. I'm also a little concerned based on his output in like the Volkanovski fight and in certain fights like that is a little intriguing. Like he has to slow down the pace. He has this like Andre Arlovski ability where he's like force guys to slow down. Merab, I'm going to say this. I think he should be 9-0 in the UFC. I said that I'm going to say it every single time that he fights until he loses. I thought he beat Frankie Saenz, and he definitely got screwed against Ricky Simon, and just one of the weirdest, craziest things ever. Merab is so entertaining. He just goes out there and he just goes crazy, nonstop movement, throwing huge shots. Everything he throws is to end the fight. He's not worried about getting hit himself. He just gets in there, nothing but haymakers, spinning attacks, kind of just throws punches to force his opponent to back up and bring his hands up. And that's when he starts going underneath the hips with some insane takedowns. besides the ability to take downs is his ability to just keep shooting them. He closes distance really fast. He chain wrestles takedowns together well. He has probably the best cardio in the game, or one of them. He's in the club. Like we're putting guys in the club. He's getting the club. And what's most impressive about him is it's not a Kobe Covington where he's shooting a lot, he's wrestling a lot, but his striking, he's throwing 80% volume, 80% power most of the time. No, like Merab's throwing like 150. Like he's knocking himself over with the shots he's throwing. He's exploding in your hips. It was so impressive that he can go as hard as he can in such a wrestle heavy game and not tire out. He does need to control a little bit more when he gets to the ground. It's one of the reasons why he has to take so many takedowns, because his opponents do work back up. So that's an issue. Jose Aldo historically has some of the best takedown defense in MMA history. I mean, he when we think of the anti-wrestler, as we like to call him, that's him. Like he's the face. He's the definition of it. But I think that's fading a little bit. I mean, he was taken down by Perrin. He was taken down by Marlon Rice. He was taken down by Rob Font, which is not, well, I shouldn't say Rob Font isn't known for his wrestling. I've said it before. I actually think he's a underrated grappler, but still, he's not your guy that you expect to take down a legendary takedown defense guy like Jose Aldo. Merab's a better wrestler than all of them. Like I said, Aldo has this ability, like the Ange Arlovski thing, where he kind of there's so much respect for him that they're really a little hesitant to engage him, and that's exactly what he needs so he can be competitive for all 3 rounds. Because I really don't trust like the cardio and the output, but I don't think he can do that against a Merab. Merab is going to have such a high pace. He's going to force Aldo to have to match him, and Merab's not going to gas. There's a very good chance Aldo just catches him. Like we haven't had an Aldo with a beautiful knockout like in a while. Like that would not shock me if he just Merab style throwing haymakers. Aldo just throws a straight right down the pipe, knocks him out, or short left hook. Wouldn't surprise me at all. But that said, Merab's going to come. He's going to come right after him. Between the output and the takedowns, I think this could be a passing of the torch moment. Give me Merab by decision.
I like a lot of what you laid down there. It is worth just taking a look at, because you mentioned Aldo's, takedown defense. It clearly has slipped a little bit because he's being taken down now, even by people that we don't really think of as wrestlers. Because I think Prime Aldo had the best takedown defense in MMA history. Because every one of his opponents was a top 5 guy. Every one of them wanted to take him down. Nobody, except for Conor McGregor, nobody during Aldo's prime went into the fight with Aldo saying, my game plan here is to stand toe-to-toe with Jose Aldo and try and knock him out. Like, nobody said that except for Conor.
And if you did it, it's because you had no choice.
Right. But his performance against Frankie Edgar at UFC 200 is, I think, the best display of takedown defense in a single fight in MMA history. Frankie Edgar was in his absolute prime. Like Frankie Edgar's prime was not when he beat Penn for the lightweight title. It's when that was his only loss in the middle. That was Edgar's only loss in the middle of like 7 straight wins against the best featherweights in the world. Like that's in between him just like thrashing Chad Mendez and Yair Rodriguez and Uriah Faber. Like Aldo made it look like Edgar had never wrestled before. Anyway, enough of the flashback. You and I can do that all day if they pay us for it. He has slipped in that regard. And if there's somebody that can show that in a more definitive way than just Rob Font scoring a takedown, it's Merab, for all the reasons you mentioned. The word that I think of for him is relentless. There are some great wrestlers that it's just their physical gifts. Like if Prime Michael Chandler wanted you on the ground, he got you on the ground on the first try. Like, you were on your ass with him passing your guard before you knew he had shot. That's not really Merab. He gets his takedowns through persistence. The word for Merab is relentless. And that only works if you have the cardio. And as you mentioned, his cardio might be the best in the game right now. even in a division where pretty much everybody has good cardio, he has weaponized cardio where he starts rolling downhill on these people as the fight wears on. That's a problem for Aldo as well, because as you mentioned, Aldo's gas tank isn't what it was. And he's done the Davis and Figueiredo thing where instead of gassing out, he's chosen to proactively manage that by pulling back his output. Um, you know, he was always a weight and snipe guy, even at featherweight, but he's more so now. You mentioned his chin dropping to 135, even though he's made it every time. Taking that extra 10 pounds out of his body probably hasn't done wonders for that either. So it's the kind of thing where it's hard for me to picture Merab just cleaning his clock on the feet. But if he's on top of him on the ground and starting to ring him up, I could see him kind of overwhelming him with ground and pound there. As much as I love to see a vintage performance out of Aldo, where he just no sells the takedowns, punishes Merab for trying, catches him clean with stuff as Merab comes in wild, because running wildly at Jose Aldo has never been a recipe for success. I'm with you. I'm seeing kind of a passing of the torch moment here, and probably good for Aldo that this is only a 3-round fight, because once Merab hits the 5-round fight phase of his career, he is just going to become a serious problem for everybody. But give me Merab by a decisive decision where he's beating up Aldo pretty bad and making him look kind of hapless by the end of this fight. With that, we come to the co-main event of UFC 278. It is a light heavyweight matchup between Paulo Costa and Luke Rockhold. Costa, the 31-year-old Brazilian, is 13-2 as a professional mixed martial artist. He is 5-2 in the UFC. That's the good news. The bad news is that he won his first 5 and has dropped 2 straight. He fought his way all the way to a title shot on a 5-fight win streak, including wins over Uriah Hall and Yoel Romero, in order to get a headlining slot opposite Israel Adesanya at UFC 253 2 years ago. We all know how that ended. Second round TKO, frankly, kind of a humiliating defeat for him after all the talk leading up. His next fight was in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 196 last October, where he came up short against Marvin Vettori. So he's going to try to make it not 3 straight against the returning Rockhold. Rockhold, the 37-year-old San Jose, California native, is 16-5 overall. He is 6-4 since joining the UFC as the former Strikeforce middleweight champ. He has lost his last 2 fights. That's bad news. Even worse news than that is that the last of those, his second round TKO loss to Jan Blachowicz, was in July of 2019. So just a little over 3 years ago. He's 37, coming back after a 3-year layoff, having left the sport on the back of 2 straight knockout losses. And in fact, 3 knockout losses in 4 of his last fights, going all the way back to losing his UFC middleweight title against Michael Bisping. Considering the state of these 2 gentlemen competitively, and considering Rockhold's layoff, it's mildly surprising that the odds are as close as they are, but they are not close. Costa's minus 300, Rockhold plus 240. When I look at Paulo Costa, it's shocking to me how quickly we bought into him. And when I say we, I don't necessarily mean you and me personally. I'm not sure exactly how you felt about him on the way up, but just we as fans, media, like viewers of the UFC's product, how quickly we kind of bought into him as a top middleweight, and then kind of how quickly people jumped off the bus. I mean, in hindsight, when you look back at his 5-fight run in the UFC, he got to a title shot on as thin a resume as just about any non-short notice title challenger I can think of in recent memory. His first 3 UFC wins were over Gareth McClellan, Olawale Bangboje, and last end stage up from 170 to 185 post USADA Johnny Hendricks. Like, two of those guys were not even UFC material. Like, frankly, none of them were UFC material. Just, Hendricks used to be. The one that kind of pulled him into contender status was knocking out Uriah Hall, who was extremely talented, but especially in 2018, one of the most inconsistent top fighters in the UFC. And then, he got his title shot on the back of that decision win over Yoel Romero. That got him to a title shot against Israel Adesanya. And yeah, Adesanya absolutely humiliated him. And I think at some point we may look back on this as, well, yeah, Adesanya did that because Costa was maybe like the worst of his challengers during his title run. That's how we may look at it. It certainly adds to that when you saw how not great he looked against Vettori and how he came into that fight basically just kind of nonchalantly and flippantly said he wasn't going to make weight, kind of held the main event hostage and forced it up first to 195 pounds, then all the way up to light heavyweight. I mean, if there's one thing that the UFC, as a personality, kind of trickling down from the personality of its figurehead, Dana White, does not like, it's being held over a barrel and told what it can and cannot do. I'm mildly surprised that he wasn't just flat out cut off of that. But to me, at this point, it's the onus is kind of on Paulo Costa to prove that he's a top fighter at 185 or 205. He definitely has some tools. Like, he's a dangerous kickboxer. Part of the sizzle of him getting to the Adesanya fight was that up until the Romero fight, he'd knocked everybody out really badly. I mean, he's an incredibly hard kicker, hard puncher. Physically, he's a jacked human being. Like, he looks like you want your knockout machine middleweight champ to look. He had the kind of cocky yet weird attitude. But it's on him to prove that he's still a factor in the title picture of either of these divisions. And the thing about the Rockhold fight is, it's not going to give him a chance to prove anything. Like, all he can prove on Saturday is that he's better than Luke Rockhold, and we have no idea what that means because we have no idea who Luke Rockhold is right now.
He could prove that he's done too if he loses.
Yeah, if he loses, or even if Rockhold makes it look really hard for him, like there's almost nothing Costa can do to raise his stock on Saturday.
Now this fight's at 185, isn't it?
Oh my goodness, you're right.
Which makes no sense at all. Like, I don't get that at all. Yeah, Paulo Costa, who just you mentioned didn't show up to fight at the week of, saying, I'll fight the fight at 205. And Luke Rockhold, whose last fight was at 205. Like, what? And they're both huge guys. Like, Luke Rockhold is not small. Like, I was watching Luke Rockhold's fight against Yoel Romero, and he made Yoel Romero look small. Now, obviously, he's different build, taller, but he's a big dude. Like, he's built like a defensive end.
He is.
Like, just have these guys fight at 205. Have them fight at 220. Yeah. Like, would it even matter?
Yeah, I apologize. There was there was some,
It's just surprising that it said 185.
But like, Costa doesn't have, like, all he can prove is that he's better than whatever Luke Rockhold is right now, and that is an unknown quantity because Rockhold's last fight was 3 years ago in a different weight class, and by the way, he looked terrible. Costa, again, he's a hard-hitting kickboxer who, I mean, he hasn't really fought any at the UFC level. Vettori was the first guy he fought that could be even described, I think, as like an above-average wrestler, and that includes the ghost of Johnny Hendricks at 185, who by that point was no longer a top wrestler. He's taking on someone in Rockhold that I feel as though a lot of people, or at least I, kind of misjudged Rockhold's skill set. But early in his career, like on his way up to becoming a Strikeforce contender, he was mostly a good grappler. He became a good kicker, I think, just mostly, I mean, through hard work, obviously, but also through his physical tools that he had to work with. You mentioned he is a big 185er. He's still a big 185er by modern standards. By like 2010 standards, he was a gigantic middleweight. He was the biggest like real middleweight in the division for years. And just, long legs, long arms, used it to good effect. I mean, he is a good kicker, but a good kicker, good grappler. He's never been a very good boxer. Point blank, like always been kind of defensively porous as a boxer. Michael Bisping knocking him out was not a fluke. Bisping was exploited a known problem he has. Just doesn't rechamber his right hand, doesn't bring it back fast enough after he throws a punch, and Bisping clocked him. I'm just struggling to think what Rockhold really has to offer Costa, because Rockhold's a good grappler, and he's had flashes of good offensive wrestling when he's wanted to use it, but he never uses it. Like he only brings the fight to the ground if he has his opponent hurt or they force the issue. So, Rockhold's going to try to stand with Costa, and Rockhold's chin was never impregnable, and it's looked positively terrible in his last few fights. The Bisping, Romero, and Blachowicz fights, all knockouts, and 2 of the 3 were literal, do you know where you are right now knockouts. Like, Bisping literally asked him, do you know where you are right now, because he was mocking him. Yoel Romero gave him a kiss because Yoel Romero was weird.
Yeah, dude.
Like,
is there anything worse than that? Imagine you get knocked out in a fight that he was actually winning, get knocked out brutally cold, and then wake up and you have Yoel Romero standing in your face saying, I love you, and kissing you.
Yeah. He's lucky that Jan Blachowicz is such a nice guy. Like, otherwise, Who knows what would have happened to him there. But it's like Rockhold, he's around he's a little younger, but he's around the age where Chuck Liddell started to lose like this.
Sure. Where
he'd get one-shotted, dead. And if there's one thing Paulo Costa can still do at this point, it's that. It's weird that this is a 185, but it's certainly not going to help Rockhold's chin. There's a reason he moved up to 205. He moved up to 205 because his ways back to the title picture 185 were all kind of blocked because of the people he'd lost to and how. And he thought moving up to 205 and not having to cut as much weight might shore up some of his problems. It didn't. Moving back down to 185, 3 years later, not going to make it any better. I'm thinking Paulo Costa finds the chin at some point. There's one thing he can still do. It's throw nasty kicks that drop your guard and then hit you upstairs. Give me Paulo Costa by second round knockout.
Yeah, this fight, besides the fight being at 185, I don't get the matchmaking. I really don't. Like Luke Rockhold, it's impossible to have any confidence. Anybody who's picking Luke Rockhold is just playing the odds. They're not confident he's going to win. He hasn't fought, as you mentioned, in 3 years. He's won 1 fight in 7 years. I don't get it. Like, why not give him a warm-up fight? Why throw him right to Paulo Costa? The only thing I can think of is this: is that how many chances you get him to fight? Why waste his name if he loses to, say, like a guy like Eric Anders? Like, you match him against Eric Anders, see if he has anything left, and then you bump him up against Paulo Costa. And I'm assuming the UFC's thinking is like he probably loses to Eric Anders. Like, I don't know. And not just you get what I'm saying, that level of guy. Rockhold, I gotta base like his skills on what I've last seen, but it's so impossible to get any idea what again. He's a southpaw. I think you said it best. He's a serviceable boxer. I'd say he's a little better than you'd say, but yeah, he's an outfighter. Your basic 1-2 combinations. Not a big cracker. He keeps his chin a little high, big target. You mentioned the kicks are his game. Tons of kicks to the body, tons of kicks to the head, calf kicks. He likes teep kicks. He likes the same size attack. So, like, for example, he'll throw a straight left and follow it with a high kick right afterwards. One of the few fighters that just does that. But he makes the mistake of backing right up. That's why Yoel Romero was able to back him up to the cage, because every single time Yoel Romero was like blitzing him, he would back straight up, and you eventually Romero blitzed him to his back was against the cage, and then landed that big overhand left. He's a massive dude, and he's super strong. He can grind in the clinch. He's got good. I actually think he's made himself into a pretty good wrestler. Strong entries. I should say good, not great. He's like not a great wrestler, but he's a submission threat. He has 8 submission wins. But I'm really worried about that chin. You mentioned like we make a joke about the left hook killing him. Yoel Romero is more of like an overhand left, but the Michael Bisping left, like these things have knocked him dead. He's been knocked out 3 times, not TKO, like knocked out cold in 3 out of his last 4 fights. They can't have confidence that Costa's an aggressive striker. He marches down his foe, very boxing heavy style, where he just moves forward. He cuts off the cage well. When his opponent is trapped to the cage, he unloads like 10 punch combinations. I talked about him in the Euro America. He's fearless. Like there's a lot of negatives you can say about Paulo Costa, his personality, his work ethic, all this, but he's fearless. Like he's like one of the few guys that actually marched down Yoel Romero and stayed in his face the whole time. He's willing to eat a shot to land a shot. He packs heat in both of his hands. His opponent, he's good at like just throwing power shots, forcing his opponent to get their guard up, and then just coming downstairs with a crushing body shot. His short left hook dropped Yoel Romero, almost knocked Yoel Romero out. He has destructive leg kicks. Last time I described it like Justin Gaethje, where it's like thudding leg kicks, not the slappy style, but just like thudding. You won't see much in the offensive wrestling, the offensive wrestling department. Though in his last fight, he did take Marvin Vettori down, who's a very underrated grappler too. So that's good. He's got some strong defense. You mentioned Vettori being the best wrestler. Yoel Romero's would be the most decorated wrestler, but he's not a wrestling threat anymore. So I just wanted to point that out before someone goes in the chat and be like, "What about Yoel Romero? He's a former world champion, silver medals." Yeah, but he doesn't wrestle. He hasn't wrestled in years. But the one thing I'll say about
those are the same assholes that always call Dan Henderson a wrestler in MMA. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, it's like when people like when right now when Bo Nickel's saying if I join the UFC, I'd be the best wrestler in the UFC. He's not lying. And then someone goes, "Oh, Henry Cejudo won an Olympic gold medal." Yeah, like 14 years ago or some shit. Like, yep. Bo Nickel was the best wrestler in America like 2 years ago. Like he's freaking good. He won a world championship. I don't know how many years ago, but like recently. So the one thing I was to go back to get off that side tangent, back to Paulo Costa. Despite looking extremely tired, like even the Vettori fight, he looked tired. He still was throwing heat in like the 15th minutes of that fight. So, I can't see this fight even being close. If Costa can have moments and make a pretty competitive fight with Marvin Vettori at this point, I think he murders Luke Rockhold. I would be surprised if Rockhold makes it to like the 7.5 minute mark. So basically directly the halfway mark of this fight. He might not even make it out of the first round. I think Costa starches him. I'm gonna say he does it early. Costa by first round knockout.
There you go. 2 picks for Paulo Costa to make it fairly quick and very ugly in the co-main event of UFC 278. Can't believe I started talking about that like it was light heavyweight. Like literally my notes say 185.
Dude, it's okay because you wouldn't expect it to be. It makes like how they would even trust Costa. And I don't get why. Like honestly, he lost to the champion. Mm-hmm. He lost to Vettori, which I know that was a 205 fight, but he lost Vettori. Mm-hmm. He has a better line to a title. I actually like if Paulo Costa won. We should have said this online. And
I'll leave this in.
Oh, okay. If Paulo Costa wins the UFC light heavyweight championship 2 years ago, I'd be surprised. I wouldn't be shocked.
No, you'd be more surprised if he was the 185 champ.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly my point. Yeah, like one, I don't think he makes does he make weight for this fight? Either guy. Does Luke Rockhold make weight?
And on top of that, Costa is now like training on his own and fired Waleed as his manager and has a girlfriend managing him.
Yeah, I saw pictures of his girlfriend. I can understand you let her do whatever she wants.
Well, and I mean, it's not a Mike Perry thing. Like they've been together for like 10 years. Like she's always there at his things. Like she's like supportive and she's a successful entrepreneur on her own. Like, so it's not Mike Perry with his literal girlfriend of the month, but
shout out to like Mike Perry's girlfriend who's watching this show. Like, why are you guys picking on me?
Well, maybe she'll think we mean the other one since he's like, yeah. So we arrive at the main event of UFC 278, a rematch, 7 years in the making, a welterweight title fight between reigning champ Kamaru Usman and challenger Leon Edwards. Usman, the 35-year-old Nigerian-born fighting out of South Florida, 20-1 as a professional, a perfect 15-0 since joining the UFC out of the 21st season of The Ultimate Fighter. Since winning the title from Tyron Woodley back in March of 2019, he has had 5 straight defenses, those coming against Colby Covington, Jorge Masvidal, Gilbert Burns, and then rematches with Masvidal and Covington. The most recent of those, the Covington rematch, was last November in the headliner of UFC 268. He will go for his 6th straight title defense against Edwards. The 30-year-old Brit, 19-3 with 1 no contest overall. He's 11-2 with 1 no contest in the UFC. Since his first meeting with Usman back at UFC on Fox, Dos Anjos versus Cerrone 2, that should tell you how long ago it was, back in December of 2015, where he lost a unanimous decision, he has won 9 fights and had 1 no contest. The no contest was against Bilal Muhammad last March in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 187. He came back from that in June, took a unanimous decision over Nate Diaz. Sorry, that was June of last year. He's coming back after about 14 months on the shelf for the title shot that has felt overdue to some observers for at least a year or two. On a card full of overwhelming favorites, Usman slots right in. He is minus 350 on most sites right now. Edwards around plus 275 or plus 280 as the underdog. Keith, I'm going to throw this to you for your pick first. One question I'd like to lob to you in preparing to talk about this fight, in preparing to make a pick for this fight, how much does their first fight matter to you in comparison to the things that they've done since? Like, how much of a guide is it?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Like 1%. Maybe psychological, like a psychological edge for Usman. But
X's
you
and
could
O's.
actually, you could actually flip that though. It might actually be a negative. He might be looking past him. Like, I already beat him. I beat him easily. I should be able to easily out wrestle him like I did last time. Yeah. So, I don't take much stock in it because they're such different fighters. Edwards was a low level welterweight at the time. Now he's obviously fighting for the title. Usman was a one-dimensional guy at the time with tons of potential. Like we knew the potential was there, but now he's an absolutely complete fighter. Some people believe he's the pound for pound best fighter in the world. I don't, but I get no argument if you do. Like he's right there. Like he's.
But if you don't think he's in the top 3, you've got some person.
Oh, you're just a hater. Yeah, you're just a hater. If you, it's like people like don't rank LeBron James top 5 NBA. Like, well, you just hate LeBron James then. Like, or people who are like this. No, this would get me fired up. It's like somebody's like, Tom Brady's not the GOAT. Like, all right, if you don't think he's the GOAT by now, then you just hate Tom Brady. Like, just no matter what, he could win the next 5 Super Bowls. You're not going to consider him the GOAT. Just okay, you hate Tom Brady. We got it. Like, that's how like that's how it is about Kamaru Usman. I'll say this, and this is more for the recap. Dana White did a thing this week where he was naming his top 5 fighters in UFC history, and he threw in Ronda Rousey, he threw in Conor McGregor, and it was more of popularity than actual skill. But he also said, I think it was John Jones, George St. Pierre, and Habib. Like, okay. And then he said honorable mention to Kamaru Usman, and I saw some people being upset about that. Like, if Kamaru Usman wins this fight, I'm not saying he has passed George St. Pierre, but he's in the neighborhood, man. We talked about the Domino's pizza like tracker or the Pizza Hut pizza tracker or whatever one you want. Like, pizza's out of the oven. It's time to get delivered. Like, he's facing better competition. I mean, I don't like to compare it. It's going back to like the LeBron James, Michael Jordan, is the could John Stockton playing now's NBA, and I don't like doing that. It's stupid, but so I kind of did that for a second. So that's why I'm trying to pull it back. Like, I don't want to say he's fought better competition. Like Matt Hughes couldn't hang in now's MMA, which he couldn't. But it's still for the era. Like, who was more dominant? my whole point is it's not like a while ago when people were starting to say it, people were just like some people were just like, oh, don't even talk about it. It's obviously George St. Pierre. It's a ridiculous question. It's not a ridiculous question anymore. Like you could say, oh, I still have St. Pierre ahead because of this many title defenses or this avenge every losses, whatever. But it's not out of the realm of possibility, especially if he puts on a huge performance against Leon Edwards and he dominates him. Now, I'm kind of putting the cart before the horse thing because Leon Edwards is obviously a really good fighter and a threat who's on a great run. So, did you want to talk more about this?
No, I was just
okay.
That was it.
You asked me one question. I went on a freaking LeBron James debate. I threw in, don't you dare say anything about my Lord and Savior Tom Brady. I went on who's the GOAT at welterweight. Any hot topics you want me to talk about? You want to talk about the conflict in Israel? Like, what do you want to, before we get into the so I said this was a C- for the card, and the only reason why it gets a passing grade is because of the main event. They're gonna have a very hard time selling Leon Edwards if he wins the title. Which is funny because England right now is like the mecca of fighting excitement, not producing talent, but like the most passionate fans. Like when they go over there, like the crowd is so much fun. Like there's a lot of good by having a British English champion.
Yep.
I just think Leon Edwards is the wrong guy. Not skill wise. He's the ultimate guy when you're taking the skills.
Right. But he doesn't have he's a better fighter than Paddy Pimblett will ever be, but he doesn't have the sizzle of Paddy. Not the personality, not the kind of blood and gut style. Yeah, I mean, he really is like if he were a champ, he'd be kind of a George St. Pierre type. Gonna be business-like on the mic. I'm gonna win the fight in a business-like manner.
But maybe you have the right opponent can pull it out of him. You get the rivalry with Jorge Masvidal, you get Colby Covington, you get Usman rematch. Something it could pull out, like it can make him. Like we've seen that before. Anderson Silva wasn't nearly as popular until he fought Chael Sonnen.
Sure.
A lot of the champions we had the right opponent for them. Like the most popular people, like Ronda Rousey, she had Miesha Tate. Yeah. She had that like, oh, you're going to be the bad bitch. I'll be the sweet one that everybody likes. My name is Cupcakes. Yep. We have the Ultimate Fighter show when it was still popular. They'll have a hard time, but will they? Now my prediction, will they have to market him? Let's see. I mean, Kamaru Usman, he's the first thing I always think of. Besides being a massive guy and being long and lengthy, he's weird. Like he's got a very weird frame. He's long arms. Like he's got a different frame than everybody else in the division. He's light on his feet. He's elusive. I
mean, from the waist up, he looks like a 225-pound guy.
Okay, yeah, you're right. Yeah, right. Like, he gets on like a workout plan. It's like hitting the squat machine. He's a heavyweight. Yeah, it's funny. Like when his manager was talking about him challenging for the 205 belt, they're saying, and everyone just laughed at it. Yeah, I don't think he'd win the title.
No,
but he wouldn't be greatly undersized.
He wouldn't be greatly undersized. I mean, he'd be a top 10 guy.
Oh, absolutely.
Like you're telling me he wouldn't find some way to plunk like a Johnny Walker or Ryan Spann type, even though they're 5 times the size? No, of course he would.
I would take him to beat Paul Craig right now.
Yeah.
Like giving up all the size, I still take him, especially because he'd fill out even more going up. So and not going, we're going to all kinds of hypotheticals and going down fantasy stuff, but he's got great output. He's a guy who gets he gets stronger as the fight goes on. The 5th round, he's going to start, and he also has like the mental toughness. Like that moment against, going back to the Colby Covington, where I was in the minority. I had a 3-1 Covington. A lot of people had a 2-2, like 2-2. Mm-hmm. Either way, it was extremely close fight, and he didn't wilt under the pressure. And think about the pressure that was on him at that moment. Not to get political and everything, but like Colby Covington was hated by so many people. This was Colby's moment. If Colby wins, Obviously, I'm talking about the first fight and the second fight. Same
Yeah.
too. The second fight was really close too, but especially the first fight. If Kobe wins, like the pressure of all those people waiting for the moment to have it on Kobe would have had it over everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And he had the mental fortitude to find a way to win and get stronger in the 5th round against the cardio king, which is even most impressive.
Against a guy in Covington that won the 4th and 5th rounds against him in the rematch. Like Covington was the guy with all the momentum when that thing was ending.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah, we already recapped it a lot, and that was yeah. But so he gets stronger as the fight goes on. He's got really long arms where he can kind of keep his opponents at the end of his strikes. His jab is really become one of the best jabs in the game. His straight right is his moneymaker. He also gets in and he almost whips his power shots. Like it's dangerous. He will work the body, which I like. He follows his long strikes into the mid range where he really does his best work. He has serious power. As we mentioned, he knocked out Covington in the 5th round. He knocked out Burns. He one punched Masvidal to another planet. He's got some good teep kicks. The one thing I'm a little worried, he has taken a lot of damage. I mean, Gilbert Burns didn't almost knock him out. Colby Covington buckled him a couple times in the first round, buckled him a bunch of times in the rematch, especially late. If you're cheering for Colby, you would remember that a couple of times that he buckled him, and I don't know if you remember, that was a very pro Colby. Colby had a lot of fans in that fight, but so that's his striking. And then what he was always great at is his grappling. I mean, he's in his grappling. If you go by credentials, you think about a guy like Ben Askren. Ben Askren's wrestling credentials are way better than Kamaru Usman. You're talking about 3-time national champion versus a junior college champion.
You're talking about, you say the University of Nebraska at Kearney is not.
Yeah. What the hell is that? Yeah. Exactly. So he doesn't have the wrestling credentials, but he has this strength that translates so perfect because of the cage wrestling, which you don't get that in the NCAA wrestling, where you can kind of grind it. Like, if you're going up a body and it's so rare to see two guys in like a chest to chest in NCAA wrestling. They're more like cutting angles, working on the hooks. They might go into the collar tie, but actually pressing chest to chest in a pummeling position where you can actually use your advantage of height and kind of lean on a guy. That's what makes his wrestling stand out, is that strength. I talk about it, his strength going all the way back. I kept it in my notes and I always keep it there. The RDA fight where like RDA was going for Kimura and he just like ripped his arm out, just like lifted RDA up because of how strong he is. He uses his arms well to kind of he looks for like snatch singles. He can shoot and drive through your hips, but he's more of a like catch a kick, take it on that way. But really, I don't know if it's like getting takedowns is his strength. I think it's that pressing against the cage, smothering you. I think it's his best position. I said it before, like that chest to chest. I described it like it'd be like being in hell, being pushed against the cage and have Kamaru Usman just chest to chest. And then like I remember going back to the Woodley fight, we just punches Woodley in the ribs like 20 punches in a row. He destroyed Woodley in that position. He's destroyed RDA in that position. The first Masvidal fight was a lot like that. But the one reason why Usman has so much success with takedowns is his mindset. Like it isn't necessarily that he gets you down. It's just that he gets you in a position for a second where he has an advantage and he never lets you rest. He just frustrates you. If he gets you down to your knee, like even if he just drops you down to your knee, your ability to just get back to your feet, he's going to make you work every inch of that. He's going to be on you like glue. He's going to elbow you. He's going to knee you. He's going to lean on you. He's going to shoulder press you. He's going to stomp on your foot. Like he's going to make it mean. He's always hitting you in every position regardless. And if you try to take him down, he's by UFC stats, he's never been taken down. Now, I think Covington should have got a credit for takedown, but regardless, okay, he's got taken down one time and going against Colby Covington twice, going against Tyron Woodley, going against Moondal's champion and Gilbert Burns. I mean, there's so many other guys. I'm not thinking of high.
Didn't he set the record against Damian Maia for the
Damian Maia couldn't take him down.
Damian Maia, not a credentialed wrestler, but had always been very successful at getting people to the ground.
Really good, yeah.
Yeah.
And then if you can match him skill for skill, he's still going to press hard for 15 minutes. I mean, sorry, 25 minutes. It's as hard as pace as it comes. Leon Edwards on the way. So I said all these wonderful things about Kamaru Usman. Leon Edwards, man, he is so good too. He's well-rounded. He's a southpaw that has really good footwork. What I like about Leon Edwards is he has a defensive first mentality, which we don't see a lot. All his offense comes off of his sound defense. He understands the first line of defense is just not being there. So he's got good footwork. He understands range really well. But then the second line of defense is head movement. If you are going to be in the pocket, you are going to be in that striking range. Make sure your head's bobbing, moving, staying off the center line. He's got these little movements where he keeps himself avoids the strike, but keeps himself in range, and he understands range. He's an accurate kickboxer. He uses feints really well to kind of draw out attacks and then counter his own. I'd say his stinging power. He doesn't have. He's not if he starches Kamaru Usman, that would really surprise me. Like, I'm talking one punch knocks him out, that would surprise me. But he lands with accurate. But the best thing about his game, besides the defense first is the thing, but it's he sets up his wrestling with his striking. He sets up really well. He's a great wrestler. I used to say he's an underrated wrestler. That's not the case anymore. Everyone knows Leon Edwards can wrestle. Which for a long time, being that he's from England, being from Great Britain, they don't get credited with the wrestling. They kind of ignored. It was like, well, how many times you got to take guys down and then hold them down and beat them up on the ground, and then everyone catching on like, no, Leon Edwards can wrestle. He uses his.
Is he the best British MMA wrestler ever?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like who's even in the conversation? I know like there's lower level guys, but like actual like high level guys that are. I'm not talking about credentialed. I mean, actual like
how effective they are at the highest levels in MMA.
Yeah, I mean, is there even a debate? I can't. I mean, there might be someone that I'm not thinking of.
I mean, there are guys on the come up, like your Jack Shore types that are effective, but there's
but not at this level.
And not doing it to
like for example. Kamaru Usman has never been, going back to the whole debate of cover that took him down, but whatever. He's never been taken down. If Leon Edwards took down Kamaru Usman, that shock you? No, that's my point. Like, he's a more credentialed wrestler who has the greatest takedown defense in the history of the UFC. And if Leon Edwards takes him down, I wouldn't be surprised one bit. Now, I hold on. I'd be surprised in the sense I would be surprised if Colby Covington took down Kamaru Usman. And more of those just Kamaru's so good. Not that I'm surprised that this less superior wrestler took him down. That's not why wouldn't be what surprised me. And even better about and he goes upper body takedowns. He can shoot on your hips. He's got really good control. He stays glued. He holds the position and he starts ground and pounding. And he has the cardio to go hard all 25 minutes. The one worry I have about him. And this is me nitpicking because we haven't seen him too much, so there might be some more holds. Like he's been out for a while. Is him getting clipped by Nate Diaz? Yeah, was he 10-8 in Nate Diaz in rounds and way ahead? Yeah, but Nate Diaz isn't known for his power, and he did kind of catch Leon Edwards, which is a little concerning. As far as prediction goes, Edwards has been on such a great winning streak that he really deserves a shot. I mean, he deserves a shot as much as anybody. But it's really hard to pick him considering he's only fought twice in 3 years. One of those performances was against Bilal Muhammad in a early eye poke that who knows where that fight was going to go. I'd feel much better about Leon if I saw that whole fight play out and he had like a dominant performance against Muhammad. We didn't see that. The other victory was against the ghost of Nate Diaz where he actually got hurt.
Yep.
But regardless of all that, I just think Usman's a terrible stylistic matchup for him. Usman's faster than him. Usman hits harder than him. He's bigger than, which is never the case with Leon Edwards. But for once, he's actually going against a guy who's actually bigger than him. He's a stronger wrestler. He has faced the better competition. He's been more active. Obviously, he has the huge fight experience that Edwards doesn't have. The main eventing of pay-per-views, just all those things. Everything's just leans towards Usman. The one big concern I have though is Usman's been out with injuries and particularly his hands. And I wonder how healthy are his hands? If he does he land a big shot against Edwards and all of a sudden he breaks his left hand or breaks his right hand? That changes everything. So that's, but you can't bet on that. I can't bet on someone breaking a hand. So I expect Edwards to have his moments, but eventually I think Usman lands a big shot. I actually think Usman's going to finish him. Give me Usman by 3rd round TKO.
Awesome. I
talked forever. I'm sorry.
No, that's what we're here for, man. I'm here to set things up and tell stories. I want the X's and O's from you. I like a lot of the things you pointed out there. It is interesting, the parallel, the kind of it's a parallel and a contrast between the wrestler who has become an elite striker and the striker who's become an elite wrestler. And kind of meeting in the middle. They're such different fighters than they were 7 years ago. It's interesting to note that Usman, despite the fact that he's been a top contender and then the champ for a big chunk of those 7 years, he has 3 more fights in that time than Edwards does. Like, Edwards has had, he's not been a terribly active fighter. I think that's contributed in part to his kind of dark horse contendership. 1, not all of his fights are super exciting. 2, he doesn't have this effervescent personality. And 3, out of sight, out of mind. When you're fighting like clockwork twice a year at best, it's easy to forget about you, especially in probably the deepest division in the sport, at least through the top 15 guys. If you go through 25, then maybe you bring in 155, 145, these days even 135. But that top 15 at welterweight is still the hardest one to get into. Look at what people Khamzat Chimaev skipped the line. But other than that, what your Shavkat Rakhmanovs and Sean Brady's are having to do, in order to even break in. There are things that Edwards can do here. Colby Covington is not known as a hard hitter. When he finishes people, it's through an accumulation of damage and just because they're worn out and they're just sick and tired of being in a cage with Colby Covington and they want to go home and take a nap.
Are you telling me people are getting sick and tired of Colby Covington? No,
I'm not even talking about the personality. I'm just saying he's a relentless and miserable guy to fight. And even he was able to put Usman on roller skates a few times just by catching him clean. Edwards can absolutely do that because he's very much the same way. He doesn't throw things with murderous intent, but he's accurate and he throws a lot of volume. Like Covington, he can certainly hurt Usman, and who knows? Maybe do so enough to win a round. I'll be interested to see what it looks like the first time Usman really tries for a takedown against Edwards, or what happens if and when Edwards decides to change things up and shoot a takedown on Usman. I guarantee you he's going to try to surprise Usman with a takedown attempt sometime in the first round and a half of this fight, unless one of them is knocked out before then, which I'm not picking. I'm sure Edwards is going to try his luck in the offensive wrestling, if only to keep Usman more honest on the feet. I want to see what happens when he tries. But I'm with you. They have a lot of parallel skills, but everywhere that there's a difference, the edge kind of goes to Usman. The only place where I think Edwards has a clear advantage over Usman is it is generally harder to find Edwards' chin cleanly. Just about everyone Usman fights clocks him at least once or twice, and the only difference from there is how hard they hit and how Usman reacts. Edwards, a lot of the people in this run have barely touched him. I was there cage side in San Antonio when he just washed RDA. That was my eye-opening moment. That's the moment where I said, okay, he's not a good wrestler for England. He's a good wrestler, period.
That's right.
He just bullied RDA. The thing I always say, he did RDA things to RDA the same way Usman did. But yeah, I'm with you. All the differences between these guys, except for that one little thing, favor Usman. And it is remarkable that as huge a guy as he is visually, I mean, he's not the tallest, but he's not the bulkiest, but he looks like he might be the biggest welterweight in the top 15 or 20 in terms of what they weigh hydrated on fight night. He's just a huge guy. And in spite of that, there are no compromises in terms of pace. That's on a night that we've kind of talked about the Figueiredo brothers, we've talked about Jose Aldo. You would expect that Usman would have to fight at this glacial pace to compensate for the compromises he must be making to cut like 30 pounds or whatever it is during fight week. But he doesn't. He fights at a furious pace. He, like Colby Covington was pulling ahead on him, but Colby Covington is right up there with Merab for like the most weaponized cardio in the sport. Like there's no shame in that.
Yeah.
And that Edwards has good cardio, but he's not going to do that. No. If this thing is still going in round 5, whoever's winning, it's not going to be. It won't be because Usman is too tired. So I'm with you. I think Edwards is definitely going to have his moments. He's going to hit Usman cleanly a few times. Usman's going to look wobbly. Usman's going to recover quickly because he does that too, which is crazy also for a guy that must cut as much weight as he does. I mean, Gilbert Burns popped him, and he survived, and he was winning the fight minutes later. But he's going to start rolling downhill. And if he really decides to embrace just his utter grindiness, I don't think Edwards is going to be able to get off the fence consistently without burning energy or taking damage. So big stretches of this fight will not be super fun to watch. There'll be moments of excitement in probably every round, but it's going to be more lopsided in favor of Usman as things go along. Give me Usman by round 4 TKO of just a kind of battered, beaten, exhausted Edwards, who probably still has no quit in him, but he's at very least going to prove that he more than earned this shot. But yeah, and still round 4 TKO. And I am bummed that you won't be here for the recap, because if he wins, we're going to have a GOAT discussion. If he loses, it's going to be pandemonium. I'm going to have to bring on someone as an unpaid intern just to handle the chat feed. I mean, we can barely handle it together as it is now on a meaningless fight night. If maybe the best pound for pound fighter in the sport, maybe the number 1A, number 2 greatest welterweight of all time loses, we're going to have a shitload of stuff to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So
real quick before I forget. So I did say after the very first fight, I would tell you why I made my prediction.
Yes.
So I picked all favorites, the entire card. And I was on the fence, and I go, there's no way I'm going to go straight favorites. So I had to go Lacerda to make sure I went with an underdog. So there you go. There's my reason.
Wow. And I mean, I guess is Tybura the only underdog I picked?
Yeah. So I just want to say like, don't at me, but like, dude, what a terrible pick that was. Like, whatever.
Yeah, we both hate going straight chalk. I mean,
yeah.
If you want someone to tell you to pick all the favorites, then just go pick all the favorites. But
yeah.
That's it. That's the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 278, Usman versus Edwards 2. I've been your host, Ben Duffy. He has been Keith Schillen. If this is your first time listening to one of our previews, first of all, thank you. Thanks for joining us. We certainly hope you've enjoyed it. As Keith says, I think we put out the most in-depth preview in the business. We're not always right, but we tell you who they are, how they got here, who we think is going to win, and a lot of the X's and O's and background information. Please do like, subscribe, leave a comment. Keith and I are both good about going back and forth and responding to your comments. But most of all, and most importantly, join us on the recap. About 15 minutes after this main event on Saturday, but this time I will be live on the Sherdog YouTube page. I will almost certainly have a guest co-host, and we'll break down all these fights in the reverse order that we just talked about them now. We'll start with that main event, work our way all the way down to Keith's extremely ballsy pick of Daniel Lacerda in the curtain jerker, and we'll see how we did. We'll talk about what happened, what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. We'll talk about next steps for some of the winners as well as the losers. And most importantly, the live chat on our YouTube page is wide open during that time. So we're kind of having an ongoing live conversation with you. We'd love to have you there. We'll take your hot takes, your reactions, your questions, your one-liners. It's, Keith's and probably mine as well, like favorite part of this job. So do join us. And between now and then, Thank you again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week, and by all means, enjoy the fights.